Question 4. Of what value is it to know about the 7 rays? Question 4 is of importance on account of its vital practicality. In the last analysis, definition conveys mental satisfaction but is no criterion as to applied knowledge. Above everything else, it is necessary that the aspirant be practical. The days of a mystical and dreamy consciousness are rapidly passing away, and as man, through understanding of psychology, comes to a more accurate knowledge of himself, he will begin to act with precision and with intelligence. He will know with exactitude the way that he should go, and will comprehend the forces in his own nature which will lead to specific action when brought into touch with the forces of his environment. Aspirants should endeavor to make practical application of the imparted truths, and so minimize their responsibility. Where there is acquired knowledge and when no use is made of it, there exists a condition of danger and subsequent penalty. Much has been given in previous books which awaits your adaptation and useful service. Much will be given in the present volume, but students need to remember that they themselves evoke and call forth the teaching they receive. The position between me and those who are reading is not that of a teacher imposing a system of knowledge upon a group of waiting pupils. The group is simply the channel through which a particular aspect of the ageless wisdom can reach a waiting world. I do not regard you as a body of good men and women, who, because of your point in evolution, are deemed worthy to receive something esoteric and unusual, and hence withheld from the rest of the race. I regard you as sincerely interested in the spiritual life, as concerned with the endeavor to be intelligent, and as willing, more or less, to try to live as souls, and to use as much of the imparted teaching as can be understood. What use students make of it is entirely their own affair. But the value of any group of aspirants and disciples consists in this: they can, if they so choose and if their united aspiration is strong enough, draw forth the teaching, and so form a center through which that teaching may go forth and begin its work of molding human thought, of throwing light upon the problems of psychology, and of so expanding the point of truth, anent the 7 rays, an ancient septennate, but little comprehended, that a new realization may be evolved and a new science of psychology may be launched upon its career. You ask, therefore, what must we as a group do that we may be of service, and so constitute a good channel for the helping of humanity? First of all, you must see to it that your attitude towards all teaching is that of willing service, with no thought of self. The growth in spiritual realization and the lifting of humanity is that which is of moment, and not your own personal growth or development, nor your own satisfaction at receiving special and new information. You will grow, and your soul will take increasing hold upon its instrument, when your mind and effort are turned towards group service, and when your tongue is rendered harmless, through the inflow of love. Secondly, let not your mind be occupied with idle speculations as to the identity of the teacher. What matters it who he is? Can you prove his identity in one way or another? And of what value is it to accept the statements of any fellow student who may claim to be informed on the matter, be he who he may? You cannot prove him right or wrong, and therefore it remains a waste of time which could well be given to more fruitful service, to closer study of the life essentials, and to meditation. What is taught should matter. The aspects of truth which I present to your consideration should count, the measure of help which I can give and the spiritual and mental stimulation which I may impart are of moment to you. The training of the intuition to recognize spiritual truth should be the subject of your effort. The sole authority is the teaching, and not the teacher. Upon the rock of authority many schools have foundered. There is but one authority, each man's own immortal soul, and that is the only authority which should be recognized. Learn to grasp the teaching correctly, and see it for what it is. Some of it is written for a distant time, and the true significance of this treatise on the 7 rays will begin to emerge as part of the general knowledge of humanity only towards the close of this century, unless the imminent outpouring evokes greater change than is now deemed possible by the watching hierarchy. Some of the teaching is of immediate usefulness to all of you. Some of it will throw light upon the problems of modern psychology, and link the many aspects of the science of the soul. Disciples grow these days by finding out the reservoir of their soul's nourishment. They will discover that the source of their strength is to be found in group teaching and in group endeavor. We are training men to live as souls and not as children to be nursed and cared for in a protected nursery run by rules and orders. As souls, men derive their life from the ocean of the universal, and not from the tiny well of the particular. Carrying their little pitchers, they find their way to that ocean, and for themselves they draw into that receptacle that which they need. In the light of your own intuition and illumined mind, developed and brought to usefulness through meditation, take that aspect of the teaching which suits and aids you, and interpret it in the light of your own need and growth. The days of personality contact, of personality attention and of personal messages are over, and have been over for quite a while, save in the veil of illusion, on the astral plane. This is a hard message, but no true disciple will misunderstand. From the depths of his own experience and struggle he knows it to be so. It is the group of masters, the hierarchy as a whole, that is of moment and its interaction with humanity. It is the master's group of disciples that counts, and its relation to probationary disciples on the physical plane, who are seen by the group as existing in group formation all over the world, no matter where its units may be. It is the body of teaching that can be made available, and its effect upon the collective mind of the thinkers of the race, that is of vital importance. It is the interplay between the subjective group of world workers and, on the outer plane of objectivity, the lovers of humanity, which seems to us, the teachers, to be of supreme importance. The satisfying of individual aspiration, the meeting of the desire of the probationers and the feeding of spiritual ambition appeal to us not at all. The times are too serious, and the crisis too acute. It is of course a fact that there are today groups of aspirants receiving definite instruction, and disciples being subjected to definite training. But it must be remembered, in spite of all statements by the devotees of the world to the contrary, that no training is given in these cases as to the handling of the details of the personality life. The specific problems of health, finance and family concerns are not dealt with nor considered, nor is comfort given or time taken to reassure or satisfy the unstable personality. Training aspirants as to the technique of spiritual growth is undertaken. Correction of the hidden factors producing emotional conditions may be suggested. Meditations may be arranged in order to bring about certain results, and instruction in the laws governing soul union may be offered, but no personality work is attempted. Disciples handle their own personalities. In the pressure of world work, the masters are finding themselves with less and less time to give even to their disciples. How then do those who are not in the ranks of accepted disciples expect the master to have the time to deal with their little affairs? In the future, however, groups will be formed increasingly, which will function on a new basis, and some of these new group organisms are forming in the world at this time. They are still in the nature of an experiment and may prove premature or undesirable. The teaching given in these new groups, the suggestions made, the experiments in training to be attempted, and the technique imparted will not be given personally and privately to an individual group member, but all of it is open and can be read, known and considered by every other member in the group. These groups are as yet necessarily few, and very small in number. They are in the nature of an attempt to see if it will be possible eventually to externalize the groups gathered around a master on the inner planes. These groups of accepted disciples on the inner side are sensitive organisms, and each member of these circles gathered around a master is aware of that which concerns his fellow disciples' spiritual unfoldment, within the radius of the circle in which he finds himself. These small outer attempts at a tentative duplication are in an embryonic condition as yet. It is a test and a trial effort, and may fail. The members of these tiny outer groups, whose membership and grouping are known only to those who form part of them, have to be willing to be instructed and developed as group units, with the other members of their group aware of their failures or successes. They have also to preserve complete silence as to the existence of the group, and a breaking of this silence warrants their elimination from the group. The personnel of these groups is forgotten in the life of the group entity as a whole. The members are trained in the group, and the group is trained as a whole, with no emphasis upon the individual but only on the group interplay and interaction, its integration and growth. Only those factors in the life of the individual are noted and handled which would hinder the growth of the group life and expression. It is the group note, the group color, and the group development which count with the training staff of workers, and the individual is never considered as an individual, but only in his relation to the group. In this experiment, a man is tried out to see his fitness. He will be tested early in his career as a group unit. If he passes the test and makes the grade, the group is enriched and grows thereby. If he fails, he drops out and others take his place until such time as the group unit is attuned and completed, and those who are sincere and true, impersonal and mentally poised, self-forgetful and loving, are found to work together in harmony. Thus they can, as a group entity, form a focal point for the transmission of spiritual force to a needy and waiting world. But it is important to remember that the attitude of the training initiate or teacher is one of complete detachment and impersonality. He is aware of the soul light and condition, and of the mental state, but he does not turn his attention to the handling of the affairs of the aspirant on the physical plane, nor to the training of his emotional nature and his astral development. Aspirants learn to be master and adept by handling their own physical plane affairs and their astral idiosyncrasies. This they must do in the light and strength of their own souls. We who teach would break a law and hinder their development if we attempted to enforce conditions which come not naturally. We should also overstimulate their lower natures. When will aspirants learn that the teachers and senior disciples in charge of them work only on mental levels and with the soul? When will they grasp the fact that until a man has contacted his own soul, and has learned to function as a controlled mind as well, there is little we can do for him? Again I say, we are not interested in personalities and their small affairs. We have neither the time nor the inclination to interfere with the way and method of a man's daily life. Why should we, when enough has been printed and taught to occupy the attention of the aspiring man for many a day? When a man is beginning to live as a soul, and when his consciousness has shifted away from the world of illusion, then he can be useful. The first lesson he has to learn is a sense of values in time and space, and to know that we work with souls and do not nurse the personality. Seems this too hard a saying to you? If it is indeed so to you, it means that you are as yet somewhat self-centered and in love with your own individual soul, having not yet duly contacted it, and having but perhaps sensed its vibration and no more. You have not yet that true picture of the world's need which will release you from your own ambition and set you free to work as we, on the subjective side, work, with no thought of self or of spiritual happiness, and with no desire for any self-appointed task, with no longing for glittering promises of future success, and with no demanding ache for the tender touch and contact with those greater in consciousness than ourselves. If this lies still beyond your realization, recognize the fact, and understand that there is no blame attached. It only indicates to you the ground whereon you stand, and that the illusion of the astral plane still holds you in its thrall and still leads you to place personality reactions before group realization. As long as you walk on that plane and function on that level of consciousness, it is not possible to draw you consciously into the masters groups on mental levels. You are still too destructive and personal. You would be apt to hurt the group and cause trouble. You would see things, through the group stimulation, with a clarity for which you are not yet ready, and would be shattered thereby. You have need to learn the lessons of accepting guidance from your own soul, and of learning to work with harmony and impersonality on the physical plane with the group or groups to which your destiny impels you. When you have learnt the lesson of self-forgetfulness, when you seek nothing for the separated self, when you stand firmly on your own feet and look for aid within yourself, and when the trend of your life is towards cooperation, then you may pass from the stage of observer to that of communicator. This will happen because you can be trusted to communicate only that which is impersonal and truly constructive, and which will not feed the emotional nature and satisfy the desire self. An interesting point might here be noted and a question answered. In a treatise on white magic I referred to the two groups of observers and communicators. The third group lies outside our present discussion, and the question was asked, who trains these observers and communicators? I should like to make it clear that the observers train themselves or, more accurately, the soul of each trains the personality in true observation. In the case of the communicators, they are slowly and gradually trained by senior disciples, working on the physical plane, engaged in training groups of communicators to be employed later by the hierarchy. In this matter, as in all else in the spiritual life, the disciple first trains himself to be responsive to his own soul, and then trains himself to be responsive to the inner group of workers, who later, as a result of his self-initiated effort, teach him to be a communicator, an intermediary. The hallmark of such communicators is mental clarity, true impersonality, spiritual tolerance, and a frugality in the use of words, when embodying concepts. It should be remembered that in the wealth of psychic writings pouring into the world today, the work of the true communicators will concern itself with the plan and not with personalities, with principles and not with individual purposes, and that all such communicators will be mental types, channels for the love of God, and group conscious. There will be nothing in their work to produce separativeness, and nothing to feed the fires of controversy, antagonism or partisanship. Much of value may come along other lines than through this group of communicators, and you may look for an increased flood of inspirational writings of a high order, and for an outpouring of wisdom from the world of souls through the hundreds who are in touch with their own souls. There will also be much emanating from the highest level of the astral plane, of a high order along devotional lines, but none of this will be the work of the band of communicators now in process of forming. Only a handful are doing this work as yet, and the true influx of communicators will not start for another 15 years. To return to our two questions, and particularly to the one concerning the value of studying the rays. I have felt the need to write on this matter for the following reasons. 1. Modern psychology is in a cul-de-sac. The many psychologies have made their contribution to the whole subject, and all of them have value, for all have embodied an aspect of truth. Through them we have arrived at an amazing knowledge of man, of his instincts and animal mechanisms, of his reactions to his environment and of his sensitive apparatus. We have learnt much about the subconscious, through which ancient racial sins and knowledges, suppressed complexes and latent desires, as well as highly organized psychic reactions, well up into the conscious mind so disastrously. We know much anent the man as a whole functioning unity, and of the interactions existing between the nervous system, the glandular system, the muscles, and their expression, in forms of quality, character, personality, and the environment. We have learnt much, therefore, about that composite being called man, and man, as a psychic entity, is an established fact in nature, as is man, the animal. But man, the soul, remains still a speculation, a hope, a belief. The fact of the soul is not yet substantiated, and in helping the truth into the light I seek to bring the subject of the seven rays to the notice of the thinkers of modern times, so that the light of this esoteric knowledge may be thrown upon the science of psychology. Thus may the work of revelation be aided. 2. If there is one thing that has emerged into the minds of investigators, as they have studied man, it is the fact that he is essentially dual. Psychology has shown that in the consciousness of every human being is a sense of duality, that man is in some mysterious sense two beings, and that it is the warfare between these two which has led to all the neuroses and complexes which tax the ingenuity of trained psychologists to solve. The initiate Paul referred to this when he spoke of the eternal warfare going on between the carnal mind and the heavenly nature, and all aspirants who are occupied with an intelligent struggle towards liberation bear witness to the same. Paul points out that victory is won through Christ, and I give a clue to the importance of this study of the rays when I state that, esoterically, these seven rays are the sevenfold expressions of the cosmic Christ, the second person of the Trinity. Bewildered men and women go in their thousands to the clinics of the psychologists, carrying with them the burden of their dual natures, and psychologists in their thousands recognize this duality and seek to unify the dissociated aspects. When the true nature of the seven rays is grasped, and when their effect on humanity in expressing the seven types of men is also understood, we shall then approach the subject of man's duality with greater intelligence. We shall comprehend better the nature of the forces which constitute one or another of these dualities. This is the true esoteric science. The science of the seven qualities or rays, and their effect upon the myriad forms which they mold and energize, is the coming new approach to the correct method of training and developing the human family. Modern exoteric science knows much about the outer form, or matter aspect, and its electrical nature. Esoteric science knows much about the nature of the subjective energies and the qualities which color and condition the form. When these two knowledges are brought intelligently together, we shall evolve a truer and more accurate psychology and a new science of human culture. Then the work of unifying man, the psychic entity, and man, the conditioning soul, will go rapidly forward. 3. A knowledge of the rays and their tendencies and energies will bring much illumination to the workers in the field of the various sciences. All the sciences find themselves on some one or other of the rays, and a science is literally the light thrown by a ray into a particular field of divine manifestation. The four kingdoms in nature are embodiments of four great lives who are found, each on one of the four minor rays. The being who is the life of the fourth or human kingdom in nature, regarding that kingdom as a distinct organism, just as man's body nature or personality is a distinct organism, separable from him as a soul, is on the fifth ray. The being who ensouls similarly the third kingdom, the animal kingdom, vibrates to the sixth ray. The being who is the expression and active force of the entire vegetable kingdom is to be found upon the fourth ray. Therefore we have humanity, fourth kingdom, fifth ray; concrete knowledge, animal, third kingdom, sixth ray; devotion upwards or forwards, vegetable, second kingdom, fourth ray; harmony and beauty, mineral, first kingdom, seventh ray; organization and ritual. These statements mean little to you at present, but we shall elaborate them later, when we come to the consideration of these rays in greater detail. I am but giving a general impression at this time. It is apparent nevertheless that when the nature of the energy permeating and animating any particular kingdom in nature is recognized and accepted, even if hypothetically, by the scientists, much light will be thrown upon the outer form qualified by a particular force and life. There is, for instance, a definite reason why the bulk of the wild flowers and garden flowers in the Occident, and also those found during the autumn season, are at this time found in tones of yellow and orange, and the mental caliber of the later sub-races of the Aryan race, as well as its general tone throughout the Aryan age, is also related to the same reason. The influence of the fourth ray of harmony and beauty, and the developing power of the fifth ray of knowledge, synonymous to the merging of the intuition and the intellect in highly evolved man, have a definite effect upon the vegetable kingdom and upon the human aura. Yellow-orange shines forth in both. I mention this as an illustration of an externalization of ray force, and as an indication of the value of the esoteric science when applied to the exoteric. The blue ray of devotion passes now into the violet of what we term the ceremonial ray. What do these words mean? Simply that the great musician of the universe is moving the keys, is sounding another note and thus bringing in another turn of the wheel, and swinging into the arc of manifestation the ray of violet, the great note G. These rays bring with them, in every kingdom in nature, all that is attuned to them, human beings, devas of order high or low, elementals of a desirable or undesirable nature, flowers, fruits, and vegetable life of a certain kind, and animals and forms of varying species. It is the passing out of a ray that signals the ultimate extinction of some particular form, some type of animal life, and leads to some vegetable aspect coming to an end. Yellow-orange shines forth in both. I mention this as an illustration of an externalization of ray force, and as an indication of the value of the esoteric science when applied to the exoteric. The blue ray of devotion passes now into the violet of what we term the ceremonial ray. What do these words mean? Simply that the great musician of the universe is moving the keys, is sounding another note and thus bringing in another turn of the wheel, and swinging into the arc of manifestation the ray of violet, the great note G. These rays bring with them, in every kingdom in nature, all that is attuned to them, human beings, devas of order high or low, elementals of a desirable or undesirable nature, flowers, fruits, and vegetable life of a certain kind, and animals and forms of varying species. It is the passing out of a ray that signals the ultimate extinction of some particular form, some type of animal life, and leads to some vegetable aspect coming to an end. Hence the confusion among the scientists at this time. The process of coming in is slow, as is all work in nature, and as is the process of passing out. Simultaneously with the cyclic birth and emergence of a new ray is the slow return to its source of the prevailing ray, present at the advent of the new. At this time the sixth ray is passing out and is taking with it all those forms whose keynote is blue, those people, for instance, who with devotion, misplaced or not, followed some particular object, person or idea. With it passes, therefore, those whom we term fanatics, those who with one pointed zeal work toward some sensed objective. Many of the flowers in which you now rejoice are passing out, the bluebell, the hyacinth and the olive for example. The sapphire will become scarce and the turquoise will lose its hue. Flowers of violet color, of lavender and of purple will come into favor. Behind all this lies a purpose profound. The physical plane, in its densest aspect, holds little of mystery for man today. He has knowledge on these matters. But the rarer levels of the physical plane lie hid and are, for man, his next field of discovery. The ceremonial ray brings with it the means whereby that knowledge may be acquired and revealed to all, and thus not be the sole property of the wise and of the occultists. The three higher etheric levels, with their denizens, are waiting to become the property of all, and with their inhabitants comes the next approximation. It is possible at this time to foretell certain events which will come to pass during the next one. First, in about 10 years' time the first ether, with all that is composed of that matter, will be recognized scientific fact, and the scientists who work intuitionally will come to recognize the devas of that plane. People coming into incarnation on this seventh ray will have the eyes that see, and the purple devas and the lesser devas of the etheric body will be visioned by them. Secondly, when he whom both angels and men await, will approach near unto this physical plane, he will bring with him not only some of the great ones and the masters, but some of the devas who stand to the deva evolution as the masters to the human. Forget not that the human evolution is but one of many, and that this is a period of crisis among the devas likewise. The call has gone forth for them to approach humanity, and with their heightened vibration and superior knowledge unite their forces with those of humanity, for the progression of the two evolutions. They have much to impart anent color and sound, and their effect upon the etheric bodies of men and animals. When that which they have to give is apprehended by the race, physical ills will be nullified and attention will be centered upon the infirmities of the astral or emotional body. These violet devas of the four ethers form, as you may imagine, four great groups with 7 subsidiary divisions. These four groups work with the four types of men now in incarnation, for it is a statement of fact that at no time in this round are more than 4 types of men in incarnation at any one time. 4 rays dominate at any given period, with one in excess of the other 3. I mean by this, that only 4 rays are in physical incarnation, for on the plane of the soul all 7 types are of course found. This idea is brought out in the 4 castes in India, and you will find that these 4 are found universally. The 4 groups of devas are a band of servers to the Lord, and their special work is to contact men and to give them definite and experimental teaching. They will instruct in the effect of color in the healing of disease, especially the effect of the violet light in the lessening of human ills and in the cure of those physical plane sicknesses which have their origin in the etheric body or double. They will teach men to see etherically, by heightening human vibration by action of their own. They will demonstrate to the materialistic thinkers of the world the fact that the superconscious states exist, not the superhuman only, and will also make clear the hitherto unrecognized fact that other beings, besides the human, have their habitat on Earth. They will also teach the sounding of the tones that correspond to the gradations of violet, and through that sounding enable man to utilize the ethers, as he now utilizes physical plane matter for his various needs. They will enable human beings so to control the ethers that weight will be for them transmuted, and motion will be intensified, becoming more rapid, more gliding, noiseless, and therefore less tiring. In the human control of the etheric levels lie the lessening of fatigue, rapidity of transit, and the ability to transcend time. Until this prophecy is a fact in consciousness, its meaning is obscure. They will also teach men how rightly to nourish the body and to draw from the surrounding ethers the requisite food. Man will in the future concentrate more on the sound condition of the etheric body, and the functioning of the dense physical body will become practically automatic. They will enable human beings, as a race, and not as individuals, to expand their consciousness so that it will embrace the superphysical. Forget not the important fact that in the accomplishment of this the web that divides the physical plane from the astral plane will be discovered by the scientists, and its purpose will eventually be acknowledged. With that discovery will come the power to penetrate the web, and so link up consciously with the astral body. Another material unification will have been accomplished. Then what else will occur, and what will be the method of approach to these devas? More and more, during the next 15 years, will men receive definite teaching, often subconsciously, from devas to whom they are linked. This will be done telepathically at first. Doctors today get much information from certain devas. There are 2 great devas belonging to the green group on mental levels who assist in this work, and some physicians get much knowledge subjectively from a violet deva working on the atomic subplane of the physical plane, aided by a deva of the causal level who works with, or through, their egos. As men learn to sense and recognize these devas, more and more teaching will be given. They teach in 3 ways: a. By means of intuitional telepathy. b. Through demonstration of color, proving the accomplishment of certain things in this way. c. By definite musical sounds, which will cause vibrations in the ethers, which in their turn will produce forms. The ether will eventually appear to the enhanced vision of humanity to have more substance than it now has, and as etheric vision increases, the ethers will be recognized as being strictly physical plane matter. Therefore when in sickness men shall call a deva, when that deva can destroy diseased tissue by sounding a note that will result in the elimination of the corrupt tissue, when by the presence caused by the vibration new tissue is visibly built in, then the presence of these devas will be generally acknowledged and their power will be utilized. By what means will their presence be realized and their powers employed? First of all, by a definite development of the human eye, which will then see that which is now unseen. It will be a change within the eye, and not a form of clairvoyance. Next, by a steady experimentation with invocations, and through their use the method of calling the devas will be discovered. This development must be approached with caution, for to the unprotected it leads to disaster. Hence the necessity to inculcate pure living, the learning of protective invocations and formulas, and the power of the Church and of Masonry to protect. Forget not that evil entities exist on other planes than the physical, that they can respond to analogous vibrations, and that the invocations that call a deva may, if sounded inaccurately, call a being that will work havoc. In ritual lies protection. Hence the emphasis laid upon church forms and on the Masonic rituals, an emphasis which will increase and not grow less as the years slip by. The force of invocations will be known later. Every individual vibrates to some particular measure. Those who know and who work clairvoyantly and clairaudiently find that all matter sounds, all matter pulsates, and all matter has its own color. Each human being can therefore be made to give forth some specific sound. In making that sound he flashes into color, and the combination of the two is indicative of some measure which is peculiarly his own. Every unit of the human race is on some one of the 7 rays. Therefore some one color predominates, and some one tone sounds forth. Infinite are the gradations and many the shades of color and tone. Each ray has its subsidiary rays which it dominates, acting as the synthetic ray. These 7 rays are linked with the colors of the spectrum. There are the rays of red, blue, yellow, orange, green and violet. There is the ray that synthesizes them all, that of indigo. There are the 3 major rays, red, blue and yellow, and the 4 subsidiary colors which, in the evolving monad, find their correspondence in the spiritual triad and the lower quaternary. The logos of our system is concentrating on the love or blue aspect. This, as the synthesis, manifests as indigo. This matter of the rays and their colors is confusing to the neophyte. I can but indicate some thoughts, and in the accumulation of suggestion light may eventually come. The clue lies in similarity of color, which entails a resemblance in note and rhythm. When, therefore, a man is on the red and yellow rays, with red as his primary ray, and meets another human being who is on the blue and yellow rays, with a secondary resemblance to the yellow, there may be recognition. But when a man on the yellow and blue rays, with yellow as his primary color, meets a brother on the yellow and red rays, the recognition is immediate and mutual, for the primary color is the same. When this fundamental cause of association or dissociation is better understood, the secondary colors will be made to act as the meeting ground, to the mutual benefit of the parties concerned. Of the colors, red, blue and yellow are primary and irreducible. They are the colors of the major rays. A. Will or power. Red B. Love, wisdom. Blue C. Active intelligence. Yellow we have then the subsidiary rays. D. Orange. E. Green. F. Violet. And the synthesizing ray, indigo. 4. It is of course to the human interest that a study of the rays makes its main appeal. It is this study that will vivify and awaken psychologists to the true understanding of man. Every human being finds himself upon one of the 7 rays. His personality is found, in every life, upon one of them, in varying rotation, according to the ray of the ego or soul. After the 3rd initiation he locates his soul, if one may use such an inappropriate word, on one of the 3 major rays, though until that time it may be found in one of the 7 ray groups. From that exalted attitude he strives towards the essential unity of the monad. The fact of there being 7 ray types carries great implications, and the intricacy of the subject is baffling to the neophyte. A ray confers, through its energy, peculiar physical conditions, and determines the quality of the astral-emotional nature. It colors the mind-body. It controls the distribution of energy, for the rays are of differing rates of vibration, and govern a particular center in the body, differing with each ray, through which that distribution is made. Each ray works through one center primarily and through the remaining 6, in a specific order. The ray predisposes a man to certain strengths and weaknesses, and constitutes his principle of limitation, as well as endowing him with capacity. It governs the method of his relations to other human types and is responsible for his reactions in form to other forms. It gives him his coloring and quality, his general tone on the 3 planes of the personality, and it molds his physical appearance. Certain attitudes of mind are easy for one ray type and difficult for another, and hence the changing personality shifts from ray to ray, from life to life, until all the qualities are developed and expressed. Certain souls, by their ray destiny, are found in certain fields of activity, and a particular field of endeavor remains relatively the same for many life expressions. A governor or statesman has learnt facility in his craft through much experience in that field. A world teacher has been teaching for age-long cycles. A world savior has been, for many lives, at the task of salvaging. When a man is 2/3 of the way along the evolutionary path, his soul ray type begins to dominate the personality ray type and will therefore govern the trend of his expression on Earth, not in the spiritual sense, so-called, but in the sense of predisposing the personality towards certain activities. A knowledge therefore of the rays and their qualities and activities is, from the standpoint of psychology, of profound importance, and hence this treatise. 5. Groups of people, organizations, nations and groups of nations are all the result of ray activity and magnetism. Hence an understanding of the forces which stream forth from the divine creative center, and which we call the rays, is of value in understanding the quality, nature, and destiny of vast human masses. The 7 planets are governed by one or other of the rays. Countries, viewed independently of their nationals, are likewise the result of ray activity, and thus the importance of the subject cannot be overestimated. Question 5. What is the meaning of the following words: sentiency, consciousness or awareness, the energy of light? We shall now consider our last question, and I shall indicate to you, in general terms, necessarily limited by the inadequacy of language, the significance of the outstanding soul qualities. A. Sentiency, or sensitive response to contact, and by that means the subsequent growth in knowledge. B. consciousness, awareness of environment, and the development of instruments whereby consciousness may be increasingly developed. C. Light, or radiation, the effect of the interplay between the life and the environment. The first point that I seek to make is a difficult one to grasp for those beneath the rank of initiate or accepted disciple of the higher stages. The soul is that factor in matter, or rather that which emerges out of the contact between spirit and matter, which produces sentient response and what we call consciousness in its varying forms. It is also that latent or subjective essential quality which makes itself felt as light or luminous radiation. It is the self shining from within, which is characteristic of all forms. Matter, per se, and in its undifferentiated state, prior to being swept into activity through the creative process, is not possessed of soul, and does not therefore possess the qualities of response and of radiation. Only when, in the creative and evolutionary process, these two are brought into conjunction and fusion does the soul appear and give to these two aspects of divinity the opportunity to manifest as a trinity and the chance to demonstrate sentient activity and magnetic radiatory light. As all that we shall posit in this treatise is to be approached from the angle of human evolution, it might be stated that only when the soul aspect is dominant is the response apparatus, the form nature of man, fulfilling its complete destiny, and only then does true magnetic radiation and the pure shining forth of light become possible. Symbolically, in the early stages of human evolution, man is, from the angle of consciousness, relatively unresponsive and unconscious, as is matter in its early stages in the formative process. The achievement of full awareness is of course the goal of the evolutionary process. Again, symbolically speaking, the unevolved man emits or manifests no light. The light in the head is invisible, though the clairvoyant investigators would see the dim glow of the light within the elements which constitute the body, and the light hidden in the atoms which constitute the form nature. As evolution proceeds, these dim points of dark light intensify their glow. The light within the head flickers at intervals during the life of the average man, and becomes a shining light as he enters upon the path of discipleship. When he becomes an initiate, the light of the atoms is so bright, and the light in the head so intense, with a paralleling stimulation of the centers of force in the body, that the light body appears. Eventually this body of light becomes externalized and of greater prominence than the dense tangible physical body. This is the body of light in which the true Son of God consciously dwells. After the third initiation, the dual light becomes accentuated and takes on a still greater brilliancy through the blending with it of the energy of spirit. This is not really the admission or the recombining of a third light, but the fanning of the light of matter and the light of the soul into a greater glory through the breath of the spirit. Something anent this light has been earlier indicated in a treatise on cosmic fire. Study it and seek to understand the significance of this process. In the understanding of these aspects of light comes a truer perspective as to the nature of the fires in the human expression of divinity. It must never be forgotten that the soul of all things, the anima mundi, as it expresses itself through all the four kingdoms in nature, is that which gives to our planet its light in the heavens. The planetary light is the sum total of the light, dim and uncertain, to be found in all atoms of radiatory and vibratory matter or substance, which compose all forms in all kingdoms. Added to this, there is, within the planet and also within each kingdom in nature, the correspondence to the etheric body with its centers of radiant energy, found underlying or substanding the outer physical form. Man's etheric body is a corporate part of the planetary etheric body, and constitutes its most refined and most highly developed aspect. As the eons pass away, there is a growing intensity of light radiating forth from our planet. This does not necessarily mean that a dweller on Neptune would see our planet glowing with an increasingly brighter light, though this does happen in a few cases in the universe. But it means that, from the standpoint of a clairvoyant vision, the etheric planetary body will grow in vivid radiation and glory as that radiation expresses more and more the true light of the soul. The soul is light essentially, both literally from the vibratory angle, and philosophically from the angle of constituting the true medium of knowledge. The soul is light symbolically, for it is like the rays of the sun, which pour out into the darkness. The soul, through the medium of the brain, causes revelation. It throws its light into the brain, and thus the way of the human being becomes increasingly illumined. The brain is like the eye of the soul, looking out into the physical world. In the same sense, the soul is the eye of the monad, and in a curious and occult sense, the fourth kingdom in nature constitutes on our planet the eye of the planetary deity. The brain is responsive to the seven senses. 1. Hearing. 2. Touch. 3. Sight. 4. Taste. 5. Smell. 6. The mind, the common sense. 7. The intuition or the synthetic sense. Through these seven senses, contact with the world of matter and of spirit becomes possible. The seven senses are, in a peculiar way, the physical plane correspondences of the seven rays, and are closely related to and governed by them all. The following tabulation will be found suggestive. That is all that it is intended to be. 1. Hearing. Seventh ray. Magic. The word of power. 2. Touch. First ray. Destroyer. The finger of God. 3. Sight. Third ray. Vision. The eye of God. 4. Taste. Sixth ray. Idealism. The desire of nations. 5. Smell. Fourth ray. Art. The beauty of revelation. 6. The intellect. Fifth ray. Mind. The knowledge of God. 7. The intuition. Second ray. Love, wisdom. Understanding of God. Through the words of power the worlds came into ordered being, and the Lord of the ray of ceremonial magic brings about the organization of the divine organism. Through the application of the finger of God in its directing and forceful work, we have the cyclic destruction of forms, so that the manifestation of deity may grow in power and beauty. Thus the Lord of power or will performs the task of destruction, thereby bringing beauty into being and the revelation of God's will and his beneficent purpose. By means of the eye of God, light shines forth upon the way of the sun, the path of the planets, and the path of man. The Lord of adaptability and the intellect brings into expression and into objectivity the intelligent working out of the divine idea and plan. When the desire of all nations shall come, and the cosmic Christ shall stand revealed, all men and all creatures shall occultly taste, or share in that great happening, and the Lord of the ray of devotion and idealism shall see the consummation of his work and be satisfied. Also the Lord of the fourth ray of harmony, beauty and art will add his share to the great creative work, and it will be found that, in the elusive following to its source of that mysterious revelation which we call beauty, there will be expressed that subtle quality of which smell, in the animal sense, is the symbol. The great search and the esoteric, following of the scent, will come to an end. This fourth ray is preeminently the way of the seeker, the searcher and the sensitive reflector of beauty. The Jewish nation has a close relation to this fourth ray and to the fourth root race, and hence their eminence at this time in the world of art, and hence the magnitude of their endless symbolic wandering and searching. When the knowledge of God shall shine forth universally, and this is not the knowledge of, or awareness of a great being but the expression through human instrumentality of the divine omniscience, then will the Lord of concrete science, who is the embodiment of the fifth principle of mind, see his work brought to a conclusion. He stimulates the sense of awareness in humanity and nurtures the consciousness aspect in the subhuman kingdoms, producing the response, therefore, of matter to spirit, and bringing about the interpretation of that to which there has been a sentient rapport. The intuition is literally the synthetic and immediate grasp of the truth, as it essentially exists, and the Lord of the second ray will bring to a conclusion the entire evolutionary process through the development in humanity of that perfect insight which will make every human being a complete and intelligent cooperator with the plan. A close study of these ray forces in relation to the creative work and the furthering of the plan, in so far as we can, at this time, grasp it, will reveal how closely the entire building-wrecking-rebuilding process is tied up with the question of the three qualities of the soul, sentiency, consciousness and awareness, and will demonstrate how the problem of light, with which I have just been dealing, has a definite relation to our ability to interpret and comprehend these three qualities. Consciousness, in the esoteric teaching, concerns the response of the form aspect in the three subhuman kingdoms. 1. To the world of living, vibratory and magnetic forms, in which each form is immersed. Every form, through its radiation, affects every other form, and according to the quality of the form and according to its evolutionary status, so will be its response to its environment. 2. To the subjective world of forces which we call the etheric world. All forms in all four kingdoms thus respond in some degree and manner. 3. To the world of quality, or of desire intent. All forms in all kingdoms respond, en masse, to the urge or the desire aspect of divinity which lies at the root of the entire evolutionary process. This is recognized as an incentive and is more or less self-directed in the human family. It is blindly followed by the forms in the other kingdoms, who respond according to the nature of their response mechanisms to these varying urges. When we deal with the inflow of mental energy and with the forces emanating from the fifth plane of mind, higher mind, lower mind and the egoic intelligent entity, we enter more entirely into the domain of human evolution itself, and the vague word, consciousness, could well be superseded by the word, awareness. In varying degree man is aware, but only man is aware that he is aware. His response apparatus responds to, and is influenced by, all the contacts to which the subhuman forms respond, but he is also aware of himself, and his response mechanism is capable of reacting, not only to external stimuli but to contacts emanating from within himself, from the self so-called, and also from the worlds of introspection and of mystical vision which seem sealed to all subhuman forms of life. In the larger picture, with which we are not to occupy ourselves in this treatise, the planet constitutes the response apparatus of a superhuman life, and that life responds consciously to impacts emanating from the solar system as a whole, and from certain constellations, embodied lives, with which our solar system is linked. Similarly, the solar logos functions through the medium of that gigantic response apparatus which is bounded by the ring pass knot of a solar system. Each form, from that of the tiniest atom to that of a vast constellation, is an embodiment of a life, which expresses itself as consciousness, awareness, and responsive sentiency through the medium of some type of response mechanism. Thus we have the establishing of a universe of lives, interacting and interrelated, all of them conscious, some of them self-conscious, and others group-conscious, but all grounded in the universal mind, all possessing souls, and all presenting aspects of the divine life. Life, quality, appearance remain thus the primal triplicity. Appearance is objective, and forms have been studied scientifically, analyzed and classified, for ages. Now we are introverting and introspecting, and have the commencement of a cycle wherein the world of quality and of meaning will be subjected to a similar investigation and classification. This will result in the giving of new values to life, to an enriching of our understanding, and will produce, as a result, the growth and substitution of the intuition for the intellect. May I urge upon all to live more continuously in the world of meaning and less in the world of appearances? It is a truer world and less full of illusion. When the understanding is developed, when men have learnt to see below the surface and have cultivated true vision, then we shall have the steady emergence of the quality of the soul in all forms and the relative subsiding into the background of the power of the form nature. It is this world of meaning which it is the privilege of humanity to reveal, and all true esoteric students should be pioneers in this field. 3. 10 basic propositions. 1. There is one life. 2. There are 7 rays. 3. Life quality appearance constitute existence. 4. The 7 rays are the 7 creative forces. 5. The rays manifest through the 7 planets. 6. Every human being is on one of the rays. 7. There are 1 monad, 7 rays and myriads of forms. 8. The laws of evolution embody the life purpose of the 7 rays. 9. Man develops through self-expression and self-realization. 10. Individualization leads eventually to initiation. Chapter 3. 10 basic propositions. In concluding this section of our treatise, and before starting on our real study of the rays, I seek to formulate for you the fundamental propositions upon which all this teaching is founded. They are for me, a humble worker in the hierarchy, as they are for the Great White Lodge as a whole, a statement of fact and of truth. For students and seekers they must be accepted as an hypothesis. 1. There is one life, which expresses itself primarily through 7 basic qualities or aspects, and secondarily through the myriad diversity of forms. 2. These 7 radiant qualities are the 7 rays, the 7 lives, who give their life to the forms, and give the form world its meaning, its laws, and its urge to evolution. 3. Life, quality and appearance, or spirit, soul and body constitute all that exists. They are existence itself, with its capacity for growth, for activity, for manifestation of beauty, and for full conformity to the plan. This plan is rooted in the consciousness of the 7 ray lives. 4. These 7 lives, whose nature is consciousness and whose expression is sentiency and specific quality, produce cyclically the manifested world. They work together in the closest union and harmony, and cooperate intelligently with the plan of which they are the custodians. They are the 7 builders, who produce the radiant temple of the Lord, under the guidance of the mind of the great architect of the universe. 5. Each ray life is predominantly expressing itself through one of the 7 sacred planets, but the life of all the 7 flows through every planet, including the Earth, and thus qualifies every form. On each planet is a small replica of the general scheme, and every planet conforms to the intent and purpose of the whole. 6. Humanity, with which this treatise deals, is an expression of the life of God, and every human being has come forth along one line or other of the 7 ray forces. The nature of his soul is qualified or determined by the ray life which breathed him forth, and his form nature is colored by the ray life which, in its cyclic appearance on the physical plane at any particular time, sets the quality of the race life and of the forms in the kingdoms of nature. The soul nature or quality remains the same throughout a world period. Its form life and nature change from life to life, according to its cyclic need and the environing group condition. This latter is determined by the ray or rays in incarnation at the time. 7. The monad is the life, lived in unison with the 7 ray lives. One monad, 7 rays and myriads of forms, this is the structure behind the manifested worlds. 8. The laws which govern the emergence of the quality or soul, through the medium of forms, are simply the mental purpose and life direction of the ray lords, whose purpose is immutable, whose vision is perfect, and whose justice is supreme. 9. The mode or method of development for humanity is self-expression and self-realization. When this process is consummated, the self-expressed is the one self or the ray life, and the realization achieved is the revelation of God as the quality of the manifested world and as the life behind appearance and quality. The 7 ray lives, or the 7 soul types, are seen as the expression of one life, and diversity is lost in the vision of the one and in identification with the one. 10. The method employed to bring about this realization is experience, beginning with individualization and ending with initiation, thus producing the perfect blending and expression of life quality appearance. This is a brief statement of the plan. Of this the hierarchy of masters in its 7 divisions, the correspondences of the 7 rays, is the custodian, and with them lies the responsibility in any century of carrying out the next stage of that plan. Section 2. The 7 creative builders, the 7 rays. 1. The rays and life quality appearance. 2. The present ray plan and the workers. 3. 3 major propositions. 4. Quality in the world of appearances. 5. An analysis of the rays and their expression. Chapter I. The 7 creative builders, the 7 rays. We have now completed our first section, and have therefore laid the groundwork for our future studies. First, I seek to give a brief exegesis of the basic theory of the secret doctrine, called the hylozoistic theory. This posits a living substance, composed of a multiplicity of sentient lives which are continuously swept into expression by the breath of the divine life. This theory recognizes no so-called inorganic matter anywhere in the universe, and emphasizes the fact that all forms are built up of infinitesimal lives, which in their totality, great or small, constitute a life, and that these composite lives, in their turn, are a corporate part of a still greater life. Thus eventually we have that great scale of lives, manifesting in greater expression and reaching all the way from the tiny life called the atom, with which science deals, up to that vast atomic life which we call a solar system. This is a briefly and inadequately expressed definition of the doctrine of hylozoism, and is an attempt to interpret and find a meaning in the manifested phenomenal world, with its three main characteristics of life: quality, appearance. Forget not to find the meaning behind all forms and life experiences, and thereby learn to enter into that world of subjective forces which is the true world wherein all occultists work. Let us take these three words and seek to understand their significance in relation to the rays. As to the significance of the word, life, our task is well nigh insuperable, for no human being has, or can have, any comprehension of the nature of life until he has attained the third initiation. I repeat this with emphasis, and in order to impress upon you the futility of idle speculation upon this subject. Disciples who have undergone the third initiation and have climbed the Mount of Transfiguration can, from that high point, glimpse the radiance of the subjective center of energy, the central spiritual sun of the secret doctrine, and so gain a flash of realization as to the meaning of the word, life. But they cannot, and they dare not, pass on the knowledge gained. Their efforts to convey such information would be futile, and language itself would be inadequate to the task. Life is not what anyone has hitherto surmised. Energy, in contradistinction to force, and using the word to express the emanating center which differentiates into forces, is not what idle speculation has portrayed it to be. Life is the synthesis of all activity, an activity which is a blend of many energies, for life is the sum total of the energies of the 7 solar systems, of which our solar system is but one. These, in their totality, are the expression of the activity of that being who is designated in our hierarchical archives as the one about whom naught may be said. This sevenfold cosmic energy, the fused and blended energies of 7 solar systems, including ours, sweeps automatically through each of the 7, carrying the qualities of 1. Impulse towards activity. 2. Active impulse towards organization. 3. Active organized impulse towards a definite purpose. I have worded these impulses as above in order to show the emergent tendency through their mutual interplay. This triple energetic impulse, born on the impetus of the 7 great breaths or rays, started the world process of becoming, and manifested as the urge towards evolution, towards an evolution which is active, organized, and which works undeviatingly and unerringly towards a specific goal. This goal is known in its fullest measure only to that incomprehensible existence who works through 7 solar systems, in their turn the expression of 7 great lives, just as our solar deity works through the 7 planetary logoi. All this has been hinted at and outlined in a treatise on cosmic fire, and I do not propose enlarging upon it here. I would point out, however, because it has a definite bearing on the evolution of quality in the human family, that the 7 creative builders or planetary logoi of our solar system are embodiments of the will, energy, and magnetic force which streams through them from the 7 solar systems into their various spheres of activity. Thus, through their united activity, the organized solar system is produced, whose energies are in constant circulation and whose emerging qualities are balanced and demonstrated throughout the entire system. All parts of the solar system are interdependent. All the forces and energies are in constant flux and mutation. All of them sweep in great pulsations, and through a form of rhythmic breathing, around the entire solar atom, so that the qualities of every solar life, pouring through the 7 ray forms, permeate every form within the solar ring pass not, and thus link every form with every other form. Note therefore the fact that each of the 7 rays or creative builders embodies the energy, will, love and purpose of the Lord of the solar system, as that Lord in his turn embodies an aspect of the energy, will, love and purpose of the one about whom naught may be said. Therefore the first proposition to be grasped by the student of the rays is as follows. Every ray life is an expression of a solar life, and every planet is consequently 1. Linked with every other planetary life in the solar system. 2. animated by energy emanating from one or other of the 7 solar systems. 3. Actuated by a triple stream of life forces coming from a. Solar systems outside our own. b. Our own solar system. c. Its own planetary being. It is impossible for the average thinker to grasp the significance of this statement, but he can understand somewhat the statement that every planet is a focal point through which forces and energies circulate and flow ceaselessly, and that these energies emanate from the outer cosmos or universe itself, from the solar system of which his own planet is a part, and of which our Sun is the center, and from that being who constitutes our own particular planetary lord or life. I should like at this point to make clear the distinction between a constellation and a solar system, according to the esoteric teaching, even though the modern scientist may not agree. A solar system consists of a sun as the central focal point, with its series of attendant planets, which are held in magnetic rapport in their orbits around that sun. A constellation consists of 2 or more solar systems or series of suns with their attendant planets. These systems are held together as a coherent whole by the powerful interrelation of the suns, whose magnetic rapport is so balanced that occultly, they tread the path together within the radius of each other's power. They preserve their relative distances, and vitalize their planets, but at the same time they preserve an equality of balance and of influence. In a few rare cases this balance is disturbed, and there is a waxing or a waning of influence and of magnetic power. This condition is governed by a cosmic law of rhythm so obscure as to be incomprehensible at this time. An illustration of this waxing and waning of influence and of radiance, synonymous terms in occultism, on a large scale can be seen today in the constellation Gemini, wherein one of the twins is increasing in brilliance and power, and the other is decreasing. But this is a somewhat unique example, esoterically. The relation of the constellations to the solar system, which is the basis of astrological research, will be considered later. I seek to point out here only the dual fact that the 7 rays are themselves 1. Expressions of energies emanating from the 7 solar systems, which are, in their turn, animated by the life of the one about whom naught may be said. 2. Influenced by, and therefore under the astrological control of, the 12 constellations whose energies are contacted by our solar system during the course of the journey of our Sun through the greater zodiac, during the vast period of approximately 25,000 years, and in a lesser degree during the course of the 12 months of the year, wherein the lesser path of the zodiac is trodden. The complexity of the subject is very great, and only the broad general outline of the system, and the basic principles governing the law of evolution, can be dimly sensed and grasped. The sweep of the subject is so vast that the concrete mind and the rationalizing nature lose themselves in the realized complexities and problems. But the illumined intuition, with its power to synthesize, which is the emerging characteristic of the disciples and initiates under training, can and does lead them into a measured sequence of expansions of consciousness which eventually land them at last on the summit of the Mount of Transfiguration. From that eminence the disciple can gain the vision which will enable him to see the whole scheme in a moment of time, and to share with Arjuna the experience of the Gita wherein he saw all forms gathered together in the body of that God of gods. He can descend from that mountain with his personality transfigured and radiant. Why? Because he now knows that spirit is a fact and the basis of immortality. He knows, past all controversy, that there is a plan, and that the love of God is the basic law of all manifestation and the origin of all evolutionary momentum, and he can rest back upon the knowledge that the fact of spirit, the immediacy of love and the synthetic scope of the plan provide a foundation upon which he can place his feet, take his stand with assurance, and then go forward in certain confidence of an assured goal. Our second statement of fact is therefore 2. Each one of the rays is the recipient and custodian of energies coming from 1. The 7 solar systems. 2. The 12 constellations. Each ray passes these energies through its body of manifestation, a planet, and thereby imparts them to the planetary form, and to all forms upon and within it. These differentiated forms are therefore animated by energy coming from the cosmic life, from the solar deity, and from the planetary life, and are consequently colored by qualities from the 7 solar systems and the 12 constellations. This blend of energies, working on substance, produces the forms, and each subjective form, in its turn, produces the outer appearance. It is not possible for us to study these forces and qualities in detail, especially in connection with an individual human being, for the scale is so minute, relatively, and the detail to be considered as so intricate. But the nature of the qualities and energies can be somewhat grasped as we study the 7 ray lives with their 7 psychological types, and the 12 creative hierarchies, as outlined for us in the Secret Doctrine. The 7 plus 12 equals 19, and if you add to these 19 expressions of the life the 3 major aspects of deity, which we call the life of God the Father, the love of God the Son, and the active intelligence of God the Holy Ghost, you arrive at the mystic number 22, which is called, in esotericism, the number of the adept. This simply means that the adept is one who comprehends the nature of the 19 forces as they express themselves through the medium of the triple divine manifestation, as it in its turn relates itself to human consciousness. It does not mean that the adept has mastered and can wield these 19 types of energy. They are consciously wielded only by the 3 synthetic builders or creators, who are 1. The life which expresses itself through 7 solar systems. The one about whom naught may be said. 2. The life which expresses itself through 7 planets. The solar deity, God. 3. The life which expresses itself through 7 planetary centers or continents. The planetary logos, the Ancient of Days. What the adept has done has been to bring his 7 centers of force, located in the etheric body, into a responsive condition to the higher spiritual forces. As he progresses, he will find that he will gradually and sequentially become equally responsive to the above 3 types of synthetic force. On the path of discipleship, and until the 3rd initiation, he learns to respond to the energy and to the spiritual purpose of the life of his own planet. At the 1st and 2nd initiations, and until the 3rd initiation, he has been led on and initiated by the influence of the Christ, and under his direction he has submitted to 2 expansions of consciousness and has prepared himself for a 3rd. When ready for this, he comes under the initiatory power of the planetary logos, and through the mediating activity of that great being the initiate becomes actively aware of energy emanating from the solar deity. He is therefore learning to respond to the 2nd type of synthetic force. After he has taken the highest initiation possible on this planet, he is, for the first time, responsive to energy emanating from the outer cosmic center. This last stage of expansion is rare indeed, and only 111 human beings, during our planetary history, have passed on to this state of awareness. Of what use is this information to you or to any student? Practically none, beyond indicating the vastness of the plan and the amazing scope of the human consciousness. What that contact with the highest type of synthetic force may mean, I cannot tell you. The planetary logoi themselves walk in the light of that sublime consciousness, and towards that privilege the Christ himself, and his great brother, the Buddha, with the 3 Buddhas of activity, are at this time aspiring. More than that I know not, nor may I further enlarge upon the matter. But the wonder and the immensity of the drama unfolding in the universe is a proof of its reality, and the grasp of man, small though it may appear to be, is a guarantee of his divinity. Stage by stage we slowly make our approach to the goal of conscious and intelligent awareness. Step by step we are mastering matter and making more adequate the mechanism of awareness and of contact. Little by little we, and by that I mean the human family, as a whole, are approaching the place of recognition, and are preparing to climb the mountain of vision. If aspirants but realized the wonders of that revelation, and if they grasped the magnificence of the reward given to their efforts, we would have less failure, more courage, a greater and steadier achievement, and consequently a more rapidly illumined world. The scope of that imparted vision warrants careful study, and the proffering of the divine ambition to the soul for recognition. It is not the multitude of words read which is of moment, but the accuracy of the recording by the brain and the adaptation of the teaching to the individual need. The vision cannot be appropriated. It is ever on ahead, but if the entire life is given to vision, and if the serving of one's fellow man is overlooked, the vision profits not. I have sought to convey the magnitude of the plan and the steps upon the evolutionary stairway which lie ahead of every aspirant and of every member of the hierarchy. The rays and life quality appearance. We come at this time to consideration of the rays, which brings us immediately into the realm of psychology and of the various psychological influences. As we deal with the second of the ray manifestations, with the quality aspect, we are dealing with those predetermining factors which produce the myriad differentiations in the phenomenal world. The quality, the coloring, or the type nature of living energy, which is our inadequate definition of the word, life, settles or determines the aspect assumed and the characteristics expressed by all the forms in the four kingdoms of nature. The individual form emanations are settled thereby, and under the modifying influence of the contact of the living quality with the substance affected and with the kingdom, which is the focus of attention, there is consequently produced the characteristic appearance, the specialized activity and the intrinsic emanation of any form in any kingdom. In my earlier books, I divided the rays into two groups. Group 1. Rays of aspect, the three major rays. Group 2. Rays of attribute, the four minor rays. The three great rays, which constitute the sum total of the divine manifestation, are aspect rays, and this for two reasons. First, they are, in their totality, the manifested deity, the Word in incarnation. They are the expression of the creative purpose, and the synthesis of life, quality and appearance. Secondly, they are active in every form in every kingdom, and they determine the broad general characteristics which govern the energy, the quality and the kingdom in question. Through them the differentiated forms come into being, the specialized lives express themselves, and the diversity of divine agents fulfill their destiny in the plane of existence allocated to them. Along these three streams of qualified life force the creative agencies of God make their presence powerfully felt, and through their activity every form is imbued with that inner evolutionary attribute which must eventually sweep it into line with divine purpose, inevitably produce that type of consciousness which will enable the phenomenal unit to react to its surroundings and thus fulfill its destiny as a corporate part of the whole. Thus intrinsic quality and specific type radiation become possible. The interplay of these three rays determines the outer phenomenal appearance, attracts the unity of life into one or other of the kingdoms in nature, and into one or other of the myriad divisions within that kingdom. The selective and discriminating process is repeated until we have the many ramifications within the four kingdoms, the divisions, groups within a division, families and branches. Thus the creative process, in its wondrous beauty, sequence and unfoldment, stands forth to our awakening consciousness, and we are left awestruck and bewildered at the creative facility of the great architect of the universe. Looking at all this beauty from a symbolic angle, and thereby simplifying the concept, which is ever the work of the worker in symbols, we might say that Ray I embodies the dynamic idea of God, and thus the Most High starts the work of creation. Ray 2 is occupied with the first formulations of the plan upon which the form must be constructed and the idea materialized, and, through the agencies of this great second emanation, the blueprints come into being with their mathematical accuracy, their structural unity and their geometrical perfection. The grand geometrician comes thus to the forefront and makes the work of the builders possible. Upon figure and form, number and sequences will the temple be built, and so embrace and express the glory of the Lord. The second ray is the ray of the Master. Builder. Ray 3 constitutes the aggregate of the active building forces, and the great architect, with his builders, organizes the material, starts the work of construction, and eventually, as the evolutionary cycle proceeds upon its way, materializes the idea and purpose of God the Father, under the guidance of God the Son. Yet these three are as much a unity as is a human being who conceives an idea, uses his mind and brain to bring his idea into manifestation, and employs his hands and all his natural forces to perfect his concept. The division of aspects and forces is unreal, except for the purpose of intelligent understanding. The readers of this treatise who really want to profit by this teaching must train themselves ever to think in terms of the whole. The arbitrary tabulations, the divisions into triplicities and septenates, and the diversified enumeration of forces which are seen as emanating from the 7 constellations, the 10 planets, and the 12 mansions of the zodiac, are but intended to give the student an idea of a world of energies in which he has to play his part. From the standpoint of esoteric psychology, it should be noted that all the schools of psychology go astray in their handling of the human unit. For just this reason, they do not judge a man as a synthetic whole, and, owing to the lack of knowledge, and to the failure, as yet, of the intuitive faculty, the average psychologist seldom enters into the realms of true quality and of the life aspect. The man under investigation is considered more or less objectively, and the true sources of the phenomenal nature are seldom touched. The determining aspects of the personality ray which produce the sum total of the physical, emotional and mental qualities is in process of tabulation and research, and much has been done of a valuable nature. A man's physical reactions, his emotional habits, and his mental processes, normal and abnormal, are far better understood than they were 25 years ago. Nevertheless, until there is a more adequate knowledge of ray qualities, and until a man's soul ray is determined and the effect of that ray upon the personality ray is charted and known, the true nature of his temperament and the real subjective cause of his varied reactions, his complexes and inhibitions will remain a problem most difficult to handle. When, for instance, psychologists realize that it is the play of soul quality and energy which determines whether a man in any particular life will function as an introvert or an extrovert, then they will work to produce that balancing of the ray forces which will make the man able to express himself in such a way that the path to the outer world is left open, and that to the inner world is also cleared of obstacles. What is the real nature of a true mystic or introvert? He is one whose soul force, ray or quality is too strong for the personality to handle. The man then finds that the path to the inner worlds of desire, emotion, of mind and of spiritual vision are, for him, the line of least resistance, and the physical plane integration and expression suffer as a consequence. The pull of the soul offsets the outer pull, and the man becomes a visionary mystic. I refer not to the practical mystic who is on the way to becoming a white occultist. The reverse condition can also be true, and then you have the pure extrovert. The personality ray focuses itself upon the physical plane, and the inner lure of the soul is temporarily offset, sometimes for several lives. Where this outer condition and pull is overstrong, and when all the personality ray qualities are focused to a point, you will have either a display of exhibitionism, as it is called, or a constructive high-grade personality, expressing genius and the creative possibilities of a coordinated physical, emotional and mental expression. The manifestation of this coordination will be outward into the world of doing, and not inward into the world of being or of the soul. Both these conditions indicate the genius towards perfection. Where the equipment is mediocre, you have a thwarted or frustrated complex and a strong sense of inferiority which may diverge towards an abnormal exhibitionism. Where the equipment is fine and trained, you will have a brilliant worker in the varying fields of human endeavor. When, as is occasionally the case, you have added to the above a tendency to introvert, with the consequences of soul knowledge and of intuitional development, you then have a leader of men, a teacher from the gods, and a spiritual power. Hence the value to psychologists in these modern days, temporarily at least, if they will interest themselves in the hypotheses of the school of esoteric psychology. They may gain thereby, and in any case they lose nothing. The 4 rays of attribute, which find their synthesis in the 3rd ray of aspect, produce the varying qualities in greater detail than do the 3 rays of aspect. It might generally be stated, as we endeavor to clarify our problem, that the 3 rays of aspect find their main expression in relation to mankind through the medium of the 3 periodical vehicles. Ray I. Power. Life. Ideas. The monad ray 2. Love, wisdom. Consciousness. Ideals. The soul ray 3. Active intelligence. Appearance. Idols. Personality. They find their secondary expression in the 3 bodies which form the personality of man. Ray I. Power. Ideas. Mental body. Purpose. Life. Ray 2. Love. Ideals. Astral body. Quality. Ray 3. Intelligence. Idols. Physical body. Form. The rays of attribute, though expressing themselves equally on all the planes and through the periodical vehicles and the three aspects of the personality, find their main expression through one or other of the four kingdoms in nature. Ray IV. Harmony, conflict. Fourth kingdom. Human. The balance. Ray V. Concrete knowledge. Third kingdom. Animal. Ray 6. Devotion. Second kingdom. Vegetable. Ray 7. Ceremonial ritual. First kingdom. Mineral. These are their main fields of influence in the three worlds, and upon this we shall later enlarge. In relation to mankind, these four rays of attribute find a wide expression in connection with the four aspects of the personality, or with the quaternary. The relationship is as follows. Ray IV. Harmony through conflict. The physical body. Ray V. Concrete knowledge. Ray 6. Devotion. Ray 7. Organization. The mental body. But again remember that the interrelation and interplay is synthetic on all planes, on the formless levels and also on the planes of form, and in this connection, with all states of consciousness and throughout the created universe. The seven rays. We are told that 7 great rays exist in the cosmos. In our solar system only one of these 7 great rays is in operation. The 7 subdivisions constitute the 7 rays, which, wielded by our solar logos, form the basis of endless variations in his system of worlds. These 7 rays may be described as the 7 channels through which all being in his solar system flows, the 7 predominant characteristics or modifications of life, for it is not to humanity only that these rays apply, but to the 7 kingdoms as well. In fact, there is nothing in the whole solar system, at whatever stage of evolution it may stand, which does not belong and has not always belonged to one or other of the 7 rays. The following table may explain the various characteristics of the 7 rays. Characteristics. Methods of planet. Color. No. Development. According to Besant. I. Will or power. Raja Yoga. Uranus. Flame. Representing Sun. 2. Wisdom. Balance. Intuition. Raja Yoga. Mercury. Yellow. Rose. 3. Higher mind. Exactitude in thought. Venus. Indigo. Higher mathematics. Blue. Philosophy. Bronze. IV. Conflict. Intensity of struggle. Saturn. Green. Birth of Horus Hatha Yoga, the most dangerous method of psychic growth. V. Lower mind. Exactitude in action. The moon. Violet practical science. 6. Devotion. Bhakti Yoga. Mars. Rose. Necessity for in blue. Object. 7. Ceremonial. Order. Ceremonial. Observances. Jupiter. Bright. Control over clear. Forces of nature. Blue. It will be clear that each of the kingdoms, elemental, mineral, vegetable, and animal as well as the human, is divided into 7 primary types or rays, and as individualization, i.e. the transition from the animal to the human kingdom, can take place at present only through association with man, it follows that there must stand at the head of the animal kingdom, on each ray, some species of animal susceptible to human influence through which such individualization can take place. The elephant is said to stand at the head of the 2nd ray type of animal, while the cat and dog occupy a similar position on the 4th and 6th rays respectively. We have had no information as to the others, with this exception, that the animals of the 1st ray are no longer in existence on Earth. Besides regarding the rays as the channels through which all being flows, we must recognize them as influences operating on the world in turn. Each ray has its period of greatest influence to which all are subject to a considerable extent. Not merely those belonging by nature to that particular ray, but those on all the other rays as well. The long period of influence of each is divided into 7 stages, each of which is qualified by the influence of the greater ray period, being intensified when its own subray period is reached, i.e. the sixth ray influence is greatest during the period of the sixth subray. We must carefully note that the term subray is used merely for convenience to designate the shorter period of influence, not as indicating any difference in the nature of the ray. We are told that the dominant ray at the present time, though passing out, is the sixth, the ray of devotion, and that this ray was already in operation before the dawn of Christianity. Also that the seventh sub-ray became the modifying influence about 75 years ago, 1860, and of course will continue as such. The first outcome of this seventh subray influence was the Ecumenical Council at Rome, 1870, with its declaration of papal infallibility. The Tractarian movement in England started at the same time, whilst the progress of the seventh sub-ray influence, still going on, is marked by the steady increase of ritualism and sacerdotalism in the various churches, and even in the Church of Rome there has been a distinct tightening of priestly authority in all matters of dogma and practice. So much for its influence on religious thought. Its other aspects will be considered later. We have also been told that the religious revival under Wesley and Whitfield in England was under the sixth subray, and I think we are justified in drawing the inference that the rise of Molinos and the Quietists in Spain and Central Europe, and of Saint Martin and his band of spiritual philosophers in France and elsewhere, may have also marked the progress of the same period, during which the ray of devotion was accentuated by its own sixth subray. With these few isolated facts before us, we may perhaps conclude that the time during which each sub-ray exerts its modifying influence is between 150 and 200 years. We do not know how often, perhaps 7 times, the sub-rays are repeated successively within the cycle of the Great Ray. It must manifestly be more than once, seeing that the Great Sixth Ray was operating before the rise of Christianity. It is also apparent that Buddhism cannot have been, as was at one time thought, the last outcome of the Great Second Ray period, for the interval between the rise of Buddhism and that of Christianity was only 500 years. It seems probable that Buddhism arose under the influence of the second sub-ray of the Great Sixth Ray period. In attempting to trace back the influence which was the last outcome of the sub-rays, 5.4.3. 2. And 1, it has been suggested that this period of the alchemists and Rosicrucians may have been dominated by the fifth sub-ray. The epoch of the flagellants and other fanatical enthusiasts who practiced self-torture and mutilation was influenced by the fourth sub-ray, and the time when astrology was widely practiced as representing the third sub-ray, while the earlier epoch of the Gnostics may have been the outcome of the second sub-ray. But these are only conjectures, and while the last named is possible, there can be no such correspondence of time in the previous cases, as the alchemists, flagellants, and astrologers were all more or less contemporary during the Middle Ages. The rise of modern spiritualism is no doubt due to the seventh sub-ray influence, and it may also be a foreshadowing of the great seventh ray still to come. It is interesting to note that this movement was started by a secret society which has existed in the world since the last period of seventh-ray dominance in Atlantean times. Every great religion which arises is under the influence of one or other of the rays, but it does not necessarily follow that each successive ray should have a great far-reaching religion as its outcome. We have heard that Brahmanism is the last great religion which arose under first-ray influence. We do not know what may have been the religion which was the outcome of the last second ray period, but the Chaldean, the Egyptian and the Zoroastrian religions may be taken as representing the third, the fourth, and the fifth rays respectively. Christianity and probably Buddhism were the result of sixth-ray influence. Mohammedanism, which numbers so large a following, is also under sixth-ray influence, but it is not a great root religion, being a hybrid offshoot of Christianity with the tinge of Judaism. The rays are sometimes considered as divided into 3 classes, the first ray by itself, the second ray by itself, and the other 5 in a group. When regarded in this way, they are spoken of as the 3 rays, and typify the various trinities. Another suggestive fragment of symbology describes the 3 rays as using respectively 3 kinds of fire to light the sacrifice of the altar, the electric, the solar, and the artificial, or fire by friction. Before proceeding to consider the virtues, the vices and the special human characteristics which differentiate the individual belonging to one ray from the individual on another ray, it will be well to refer to the origin of the two ray influences which constitute the dominant and the modifying factors in the character of every human being, as well as to the planetary influence, or the ray of the personality, which again modifies these two great influences during any given life. We have seen that 7 rays are 7 differentiations of one great cosmic ray, effected within the very being of our solar logos before he began his creation. Now we know that the divine spark, the divine center of consciousness in each one of us, comes from the highest principle of our logos. It has therefore within it the potentiality of all the rays, but from the time when our logos formed within himself the countless centers of divine consciousness, each one of these centers was colored by the special attributes of one or other of the rays. Seeing that the moment each became limited, i.e. separated from the absolute consciousness of the logos by even the finest veil of differentiation, it must necessarily belong to one or other of the rays, the very essence of our being, the central spark of the divine in each one of us, may thus be said to belong to one or other of the 7 rays, and this may be spoken of as a man's primary ray. It will be remembered that the first great outpouring from the Logos vivified universal substance and caused every atom of matter within the ring pass not of his system to vibrate in 7 different measures of vibration. The second outpouring caused molecular combinations, thus forming the 6 subplanes below the atomic on each plane, and produced form. It was at the time of the second outpouring that each of the divine centers of consciousness put forth a thread of being into an atom of the highest sub-planes of the atmic, the buddhic, and the monasic planes, atoms destined to be the nuclei of the future bodies, each on its respective plane, the 3 forming the upper triad so often referred to. Now every atom is under the influence of one or other of the rays, and the atmic, buddhic and monasic atoms referred to all belong to the same ray. But this is not necessarily the same ray as that to which the overshadowing center of consciousness belongs. In fact, in the majority of cases, the ray of the center of consciousness and the ray of the triad are different. The one modifies the other, the former being the primary, called by Mrs. Besant the monadic ray, the other being the secondary or individual ray, since the monasic atom is the nucleus of the future causal body in which the individual passes from life to life. This body is of course gradually built up of particles of matter belonging to the same quality and type as its nucleus atom, and when it is so built through long ages of evolution, the overshadowing divine center of consciousness, which has through the ages also evolved individually, unites with it, and the immortal individual ego starts on its upward climb through the human kingdom. This is the third outpouring for each soul. The influence of this secondary or individual ray constitutes the main factor in the earlier stages of evolution, i.e., in the elemental, mineral, vegetable and animal kingdoms. But of course the deepest rooted influence must be that which affects the divine center of consciousness. Therefore when the union above referred to takes place, and the entity has become the reincarnating ego, the primary ray becomes and remains the dominant force. But there is still another influence to be spoken of. This is the planetary ray under which each human being is born. It must of course be understood that the so-called influence of a planet is really the influence of the hierarchy ruling over that planet. This personal ray is an important factor in the character of a man during the one lifetime of its operation. I say one lifetime, but it may of course be one or more, if the karmic conditions demand it. For the moment of birth for every individual is fixed in accordance with karmic necessities, and probably all of us, whatever our primary or individual rays, have passed lifetimes again and again under the personal influence of all the 7 rays. 2. The present ray plan and the workers. The work of the first and second rays is primarily instrumental in the work of materializing the plan of God for our world and causing its manifestation. It would be of interest at this point to consider the plan as it is at present working out, for the reason that these 2 types of ray force, that of power will and that of love wisdom, are predominantly operative at this time. All the workers along other lines of force, whether manifesting objectively or active subjectively, have temporarily subordinated their interests and to some degree cancelled their previous arrangements, in order to meet the need of the world. There is a plan now coming into effect, and this has demanded the attention and called for the loyal cooperation of all departments of the world government. In all organized endeavor and in all wide schemes of construction and of work there must ever be the subordination of certain factors to other factors, and never more so than in the working out, at this time, of the hierarchical plan. If the teachings in this treatise are to achieve the purpose for which they are intended, it is essential that scattered through the occult generalities and the universal concepts there should be those points of immediate and imperative interest which will make this treatise of practical usefulness and of living application. In a treatise on white magic I outlined one of the first steps taken by the hierarchy in the work of inaugurating the new plan. This plan was tentatively formulated in 1900, at one of the great quarterly meetings of the hierarchy. In 1925, at the next great meeting for cooperation, the new plan was discussed in greater detail. Certain necessary changes, growing out of the results of the World War, were negotiated, and the members of that important council determined two things. First, that there should be a united effort by the collective members of the planetary hierarchy, over a period of several years, that is until 1950, to bring about certain definite results, and that during that time the attention of the Great Ones should be turned towards a definite attempt to expand the consciousness of humanity and to institute a sort of forcing process, so that men's horizon of thought would be tremendously enlarged, and their faith, assurance and knowledge be equally increased and strengthened. It was decided that certain areas of doubt should be cleared up. Secondly, it was determined to link more closely and subjectively the senior disciples, aspirants and workers in the world. To this end, all the masters put their personal groups of disciples in touch with each other, subjectively, intuitively, and sometimes telepathically. Thus the new group of world servers came into being. Instead, therefore, of 7 groups of workers in the world, all engrossed with activities along the 7 major lines of force, their place in the scheme determined by their ray, the masters, their disciples and the probationers grouped themselves into 3 main divisions, so that the political, the religious, and the educational departments of human evolution might be adequately served. At the same time they organized the intermediate group of world servers, who could act as liaison of officers, interpreters, and intermediaries between the interactive hierarchy and the thinkers of the world, and also serve as agents in every country and in every group. Thus all groups which were animated by any desire to serve, and which were, in spite of errors in technique and method, of any usefulness in aiding their fellow men, were swept into a current of spiritual stimulation with the intent to increase their effectiveness. Groups that were crystallized and sectarian as a whole would fail to respond, but in all of them, even the most dead, there were found a few who were responsive to the new impulse. The institution of this new plan automatically brought about an augmented training of those men and women who showed signs of being responsive to subjective influences and to the intuition. It was found wise to bring about a forcing process, in order to make mankind more sensitive and to develop certain latent but hidden powers, and also to attempt to bring the more advanced types of men up to a standard of sensitivity and to a spiritual receptivity which had been hitherto the prerogative of the few mystics and intuitives. During the past few years this process has been going on, and the results have proved better than had been anticipated. The war, which devastated the world, cleared away much debris. Roughly speaking, the plan fell into 3 divisions in the minds of its organizers. First, political. The objective of the work here planned was the development and the establishment of an international consciousness. This was an effort along the line of power or will, of government, or along the line of the first ray. Disciples and aspirants working in the field of organization, and the mass of idealists, were organized in this work, and the 7th and 6th ray workers were brought into line. The groups therefore ranged themselves into one group in this endeavor. It was also determined to demonstrate the need for economic synthesis, as part of the work of relating the nations to each other, so that the spirit which is evidenced by such an organization as the Red Cross, for instance, might also be evidenced internationally in the interplay of the nations with each other. It is needless to point out that material stress and strain and the wrecking of old political parties and trade relations had to play their part. It was determined to demonstrate the necessity of establishing a spirit of international dependence and interrelation, so that the nations would be forced to realize politically that isolation, separativeness, and the cultivation of a national egoism must go, and that a national spirit colored by a sense of superiority, by class hatreds and racial antagonisms, constitutes a barrier to the true development of humanity. The people must be taught that the longing to increase possessions is a deterrent to real expansion. Thus plans were laid whereby the brotherhood of nations, based on mutual need, mutual understanding, and mutual helpfulness, should gradually come into being. It was the establishing of a state of mind which was the primary objective, and not the establishing of some impossible and mythical utopia, or of those material conditions whereby one group is entirely subordinated by the will to power of another group which enforces a standardized and uniform condition through the use of power in some form or another. The work indicated, and therefore set before the new group of world servers, is to enunciate those principles of national relations which underlie a world state or federation, and their instructions were to get the ear of the leaders in various countries, and thus slowly and gradually awaken the masses, through them, to the true significance of that easily spoken, but little understood word: brotherhood. This work is perhaps one of the hardest of the tasks which the Society of Organized Minds has ever set itself. Racial hatreds and national aspirations are so strong, and the ignorance of the masses is so great, that all the resources of the workers along the line of government and power, the first ray, were necessary to make the needed impact upon the public consciousness. There has been, and there still is, much to destroy before the nations are reduced to the point where they will become sensitive to the new vision, and able to recognize their need of each other. It has been interesting to note how the idea of the controlled and beneficently applied power of those who work with and through ideas has, during the past few years, materialized on the physical plane through the medium of the dictatorship of the proletariat, of the workers of a nation, as set up in Russia. This has been subversive of the rule and control of the aristocracy, of the bourgeoisie and of the intelligentsia. It has glorified work and the workers, and has driven out of the country, by death or exile, some of its best elements. Yet behind all the mistakes and cruelty, and behind the rank materialism, there lie great ideals, the supply of the need of all, the beauty of mutual service, and the divinity of constructive work. In Germany, you have the dictatorship of racial superiority, and the attempt to deify a race. Without humor and real understanding, one race is preparing to dictate terms to other races, by the weight of its thought and its achievements rather than by war. Yet the ideal of a Superman is a true ideal, and it needs upholding before the world. Temporarily, it has been forgotten that the Superman is the goal for all, and that Asiatics, Nordics, Jews, Gentiles, Americans, and Anglo-Saxons, the Africans and all other world races are children of the same Father, fed from the same source of life, and saved by the same divine Christ principle. Therefore the Superman has been and will be found emerging out of the ranks of every people, to find his way into the ranks of the spiritual hierarchy and the new group of world servers. In America, you have the dictatorship of organized business seeking to regulate and control every department of the economic life of the nation, and cutting deep down, through the trained minds in the government, to the very roots of the national existence. That certain types of mind may regard this as an infringement of the liberty of the subject is of small importance, relatively speaking, compared to the gradually emerging synthesis which aims subjectively to kill out greed and end the exploitation of the many by the few. In Great Britain, we find the dictatorship of empire, if such a paradoxical term may be employed, but it is an empire of the middle classes, controlling and balancing. In Italy, in Turkey and elsewhere other great experiments are going on. The originators of these various national movements are often ignorant of the impulses which lie back of their work, and are frequently unable to explain the ideals toward which they are working, except in terms of human ambition and power. Nevertheless, unknown to themselves, they are really sensitive to the great ideas thrown into their minds by the minds behind the scenes. They respond to the idea of general good, of human equality, of the Superman, of universal trade requirements, and of the distribution of wealth, but, and here is the important point, because the inner synthesis of effort is not emphasized, because there is no general knowledge as to the source of the great concepts, and no understanding of the inner brotherhood which is guiding humanity towards an outer brotherhood. These great principles are being widely distorted, selfishly applied, and separately utilized. The fires of class hatreds, of racial antagonisms, and of national pride are burning intensely strong. Such is the problem before the great ones at this time. What will they do to bring the nations, through the agency of the inner department of government and the political rule which we have been considering, to a realization of their essential unity, and so further that, peace on earth, goodwill to men, of which we all dream? Second, religions. The aim before this department is to establish a universal understanding of the nature of reality, and to foster the growth of the spiritual consciousness. Though in some ways religious differences are the hardest to bridge or heal, yet real progress has been made in this phase of the hierarchical work. There is today in the world a very large number of those who fundamentally believe in the brotherhood of religions. Though the unintelligent masses everywhere have little or no idea of things spiritual, they can be more easily brought to believe in the one God and to the idea of a universal faith than to any other idea. Many thousands of them are frankly agnostic or believe in nothing, whilst many other thousands are restive under the control of theological authority. They have nevertheless within them that germ of the spirit of love which is normally inclusive and intuitive. Curiously enough, along this line the seething millions of the Orient present a more serious problem to the great ones than do the peoples of the Occident, for ignorance is deeply prevalent among the masses of Asia as to the trend of affairs in the world of religion, owing to the widespread illiteracy of the races, and their consequent easy exploitation and control by the religious demagogues, fervent prophets and reactionaries. Disciples or workers on the second ray are now actively handling this problem. It is interesting to note that the reason for the success in breaking down old barriers and in bringing about a condition of spiritual readiness everywhere in the Occident, is largely due to the work of the Orientalist scholars in France, Germany and England. They have made the literature of the East available, in all its beauty, to the West, and so have linked the spiritual truths of all ages with the truth of the Christian presentation, showing them all to be of equal progressive value. Now the masses in India, China, and Northern Africa must be awakened to the inner significance of their own faiths, and to the part that Christianity plays in the same great religious program. This is occupying the close attention of certain second-ray teachers in India, Japan and Syria. During the next 10 years the work of the Fellowship of Religions, of which the outer organizations are an externalization, will greatly increase. Soon we shall have the inner structure of a world faith so clearly defined in the minds of many thousands that its outer structure will inevitably make its appearance before the end of the century. The inner structure of the World Federation of Nations will eventually be equally well organized, with its outer form taking rapid shape by 2025. Do not infer from this that we shall have a perfected world religion and a complete community of nations. Not so rapidly does nature move, but the concept and the idea will be universally recognized, universally desired, and generally worked for, and when these conditions exist nothing can stop the appearance of the ultimate physical form for that cycle. Third, scientific. The workers along this line have definitely set themselves the goal of expanding man's consciousness and so widening his horizon that a synthesis of the tangible and the intangible will take place. This will bring about the entrance of mankind into a new and subjective realm, and his apprehension of new states of awareness. These developments will be brought about by the workers in the fields of education, of science, and of psychology. Great things are on the way at this time, and the activities of workers on the third and fifth rays have never been so well directed nor so potent as today. As I told you, and as I now repeat, the workers on all the rays are organized to take part in one supreme effort, an effort towards which the entire Christian era has been tending and for which it has been a preparation. The seventh and sixth rays are occupied with the work of government and with the task of producing a new synthesis, and thus the force of all the workers along those lines is combining with the energy of the first ray. The energies of the aspirants and disciples on the third and fifth rays are turned to the work of expanding the human consciousness, of bringing to light the hidden wonders of the universe, and of hastening the unfoldment of the latent powers in mankind. These powers, when awakened, will be extensions of many of the present senses and will admit man into that world which lies behind the veil of ignorance and matter. You will note that so strenuous is the work of breaking down national group isolation and separativeness that it takes the united energies of 3 groups of workers to bring about the desired results. The 7 groups of workers are organized therefore as follows. 1. In the Department of Politics. 1st, 6th and 7th rays. 2. In the Department of Religion. 2nd and 4th rays. 3. In the Department of Education. 3rd and 5th rays. Do not forget that, though the work is being carried forward in 3 fields of human thought and activity, the net result is one directed effort towards the production of synthesis and a great preparatory drive towards a revelation of such wonder that I cannot yet detail it. Recognition of its truth is dependent upon inner growth and illumination, and this growth is being speeded up, leading to an easier recognition of that which is on the way. Remember, revelation seldom comes along the expected lines. There will be a pouring in of light upon mankind which will alter his conditions of living, change his outlook upon world affairs, and inaugurate a new age which will be distinguished by an aptitude for group synthesis and cooperation, and by new mental powers, leading to a reorientation of the mind so that it can function with equal facility in 2 directions. It will be able to turn outward into the world of manifested forms, and inward into the world of synthesis, of unity and of spirit. There will be a fresh attitude towards life which will evidence itself in a better sense of values, for life will have a meaning hitherto unknown, and we shall have an interpretation of that meaning which will enrich our daily experience. Towards this end all true workers are now bending every effort. Earlier in this treatise I referred to the areas of doubt which now exist in man's mind, and I should like briefly to refer to the 3 major areas which, when cleared up, will facilitate the bringing in of the new age with its new civilizations, new sciences and new religion. There are 3 problems which the next few years will see well on the way towards an intelligent solution in the minds of the most conservative, but which will be regarded as definitely solved by the intuitive and illumined. These 3 problems might be regarded as constituting the 3 main objectives in the fields of science, of politics and of religion. With their solution will come the more rapid success of the world problems of government, of faith and of matter. Please note the distinction and significance of these last 3 words. The problem of ideas. In the final analysis, the main problem of world government is the wise use of ideas. It is here that the power of speech makes itself felt, just as in the Department of Religion or of Education the power of the written word, of the printed page, is felt. In the field of politics, the masses are swayed by their orators, and never more so than now through the use of the radio. Great ideas are dinned into the ear of the public without cessation, theories as to dictatorship, communism, Nazism, fascism, Marxism, nationalism, and democratic ideals. Methods of rule by this or that group of thinkers are presented to the public, leaving them no time for consideration, or for clear thinking. Racial antipathies are spread, and personal preferences and illusions find expression, bringing about the deception of the unthinking. The man who has a golden tongue, the man who has the gift of playing with words and can voice with emphasis people's grievances, the juggler in statistics, the fanatic with a certain and sure cure for social ills, and the man who loves to fan race hatreds, can ever get a following. Such men can with facility upset the balance of the community and lead a body of unthinking adherents to a transient success and power, or to obloquy and oblivion. In the aggregate of this play with ideas, and in the constant impact upon the human consciousness of the great concepts which lie back of our evolutionary process, the race is developing the power to think, to choose, and to build a sure foundation. Through the evolutionary presentation of these ideas there is a steady march towards a liberty of thought, through the old method of experiment, of discard, and of renewed effort with ever newer concepts, which will enable mankind to build true to the great thought patterns which underlie the outer structure of our world. The attentive minds of the age are constantly being made sensitive to these patterns, so that the individual mind can recognize them and wrest them out of the darkness into the light of day. Thus will the true patterns be made available, to play their part in leading the race towards its destiny, towards those deeper realizations which mold the racial types, and to that synthesis of understanding which will result in a realization of brotherhood. Thus thoughts play their part, and the problem of ideas will be increasingly understood, until the time may come when we shall have our trained intuitives and thinkers who will be able to work directly in the world of concepts and bring through, for the use of the race, the pattern ideas upon which to build. In saying this, I realize that I may be accused of romancing and of communicating the impossible, but time will demonstrate the truth of that which I predict. The world structure emerges from and is built upon certain inner thought patterns, and it is these thought patterns which are producing the present flood of governmental experiments among all nations. But today there is no training given upon the process of contacting the world of patterns and upon the true interpretation of ideas, and hence the problems. Later, when the race sees its problem with clarity, it will act with wisdom and train with care its observers and communicators. These will be men and women in whom the intuition has awakened at the behest of an urgent intellect. They will be people whose minds are so subordinated to the group good, and so free from all sense of separativeness, that their minds present no impediment to the contact with the world of reality and of inner truth. They will not necessarily be people who could be termed religious in the ordinary sense of that word, but they will be men of goodwill, of high mental caliber, with minds well stocked and equipped. They will be free from personal ambition and selfishness, animated by love of humanity and by a desire to help the race. Such a man is a spiritual man. The problem of God. In the world of religion we shall see the solution of the second problem, and the ridding of the human consciousness of another area of doubt. The fact of God will be established and men's questioning in this respect will end. Such a God will not be a national or a racial God, not Christian, Hindu or Buddhist. Such a God will not be a figment of man's creative imagination or an extension of his own consciousness, but a deity of essential life, who is the sum total of all energies, the energy of life itself, the energy of love, the energy of intelligence, of active experience, and that energy which produces the interplay between the seen and the unseen. A God most surely transcendent, but at the same time most assuredly immanent, a God of such immensity that the heavens proclaim him, and so intimate that the humblest child can recognize. How can this be, you ask? I give a simple reply to your question, and yet one so scientific and so profound in meaning that only when it is realized to be a fact in a natural process will it be appreciated with accuracy. Out of the flesh God will be seen and known, yet with the eye of the inner vision can God be seen even when a man is occupying a body of flesh. Not with the physical eye can deity be seen, though the hallmark of divinity is everywhere. There is an eye which can be developed and used, and which will enable its possessor to see God working on the inner side of life, within himself and within all forms, for, when thine eye is single, thy whole body is full of light. In that light shall we see light, and so see God. The three words, electricity, light and life, express divinity, and their synthesis is God. When we know the three as one in our own experience, then we know God. The lowest aspect we are now using, and of it we are increasingly aware. The second aspect of light is on the point of revelation, through the right understanding of electrical phenomena. There lies the clue to the new age, the age of light, of illumination and of revelation. The esotericists of the world will understand a little of that to which I refer, and in their hands lies the training of humanity so that men may use that true vision and learn to utilize the single eye. I would have you note, however, that the majority of true esotericists are found outside, and not within, the bulk of the schools which call themselves esoteric. The problem of immortality. The third area of doubt as to the fact of immortality, will be solved before long in the realm of science, as the result of scientific investigation. Certain scientists will accept the hypothesis of immortality as a working basis upon which to base their search, and they will enter upon that search with a willingness to learn, a readiness to accept and a desire to formulate conclusions based upon reiterated evidence. These conclusions will, in their turn, form the basis for another hypothesis. Within the next few years the fact of persistence and of the eternity of existence will have advanced out of the realm of questioning into the realm of certainty. The problem will have shifted further back. There will be no question in anyone's mind that the discarding of the physical body will leave a man still a conscious living entity. He will be known to be perpetuating his existence in a realm lying behind the physical. He will be known to be still alive, awake and aware. This fact will be demonstrated in several ways. The development of a power within the physical eye of a human being, a power which has always been there, but which has been very little used, will reveal the etheric body, the double, as it is sometimes called, and men will be seen occupying that body in some definite spatial area whilst their dead or disintegrating physical body has been left behind. Then again, the growth in the number of those people who have the power to use the single eye, sometimes called the reawakened third eye, will also add to the demonstration of the truth of immortality, for they will with facility see the man who has discarded his etheric body as well as his physical body. By the very weight of their numbers, and by the reputability of their position, they will carry their point. Through a discovery also in the field of photography, now being investigated, will the fact of survival be proven. Through the use of the radio by those who have passed over will communication be eventually set up, and reduced to a true science. Nevertheless, certain imminent happenings will do more to annihilate the veil between the seen and the unseen than any other line of activity hitherto initiated. Of this I may not speak beyond telling you that an illumination will be set up and a radiance revealed which will result in a tremendous stimulation of mankind and bring about an awakening of a new order. Man will be keyed up to a perception and to a contact which will enable him to see through, which will reveal the nature of the fourth dimension, and will blend the subjective and the objective together into a new world. Death will lose its terrors, and that particular fear will come to an end. Men are so occupied with their demand for light, so earnest in their cry for release from the present blindness, and so anxious for relief from the surrounding chaos, that they are apt to forget that from the inner side there is also a great effort and push to help, on the part of the custodians of the plan and their assistants. This urge on their part to help is more active than ever before, as human beings demand more potently the privilege of light. A demand from the race, plus a response from the waiting hierarchy, must inevitably produce potent results. The urge to know and the urge to teach are assuredly related and a part of the natural process of conscious development. The next few decades will mark a happening of such profound and widespread consequences that the present era in which we live will come to be looked upon as the Dark Ages. Science will penetrate deeper into the realm of the intangible, and work in mediums and with apparatus hitherto unknown. The release of the potencies in an atom will mark a revolutionary era, and science will have much to discard and much to give as it works with energies and forms of life hitherto unrecognized. The spiritualists will make a discovery whereby the means of contact with those who function out of the physical body will be greatly facilitated, and a group of mediums will begin to act as intermediaries for a number of scientists on the inner side of life and those who are still in physical bodies. Through the activity of the real esoteric schools, a technique of training will be instituted which will develop the new powers that will substantiate the old truth and turn men's beliefs into certainties. Through the stimulating and occultly scientific work of the Department of Religions, men will come to new knowledge and awareness, and will arrive at an uplift that will bring mankind to the Mount of Transfiguration. Through the work of the Department of Government, men will come to an understanding of those ideas which are needed to carry the nations the next step forward to mutual help. I shall try to express the deepest objective of the Brotherhood, so that you can understand and cooperate. Humanity is intended to act as a powerhouse through which certain types of divine energy can flow to the various forms of life found in the subhuman kingdoms. This flow of energy must be intelligently apprehended and intelligently directed, and thus will be brought to an end conditions of decay and of death now prevalent everywhere. Thus mankind can link the higher and the lower manifestations of life, but this will be possible only when men themselves have, within themselves, linked their higher and their lower aspects. This is, and should be, one of the objectives of all esoteric training. Men are intended to acquire the facility to function freely in either direction, and so with ease contact the life of God as it flows through those forms we call superhuman, and those which are subhuman. Such is the emerging goal. The next few years will mark an intensive effort on the part of the hierarchy and on the part of the new group of world servers. There is a term set to their effort, and later this type of activity will end, and workers will enter into more extensive fields, if the work proves effective. Should the spiritually minded and intellectually constituted people of the race fail at this time to initiate the plan, to wrest it out of the unseen and carry it into the realm of the seen, then we shall see a period of difficulty and of slower growth, but no entire collapse of the fabric of civilization as the fear-mongers indicate. But we shall anticipate no such failure and no such setback to the carefully laid plans of the watchers on the inner side. The word has gone out to rally all the disciples and aspirants of the world to an intensive work, and with that appeal from the great ones I seek to occupy myself. Everyone is needed and must go forward with hope and certainty. The hierarchy is, with concentration, working and bending every effort to make the plan a success. The new group of world servers are being more closely integrated, and the work they are to do is being carefully planned. In London, in New York and in Geneva are 3 centers of their activity, and at Darjeeling and in Tokyo there is a mustering of forces. I challenge the thinkers of the world to drop their sectarianism, their nationalism, and their partisanships, and in the spirit of brotherhood to work in their particular nation, regarding it as an integral part of a great federation of nations, a federation that now exists on the inner side but waits for the activity of the world thinkers to bring it to materialization on the outer side. I charge them to work in the cause of religion and in the field of that particular religion in which they, by an accident of birth or by choice, are interested, regarding each religion as part of the great world religion. They must look upon the activities of their group, society or organization as demanding their help, just in so far, and only so far, as the principles upon which they are founded and the techniques which they employ serve the general good and develop the realization of brotherhood. I ask you to drop your antagonisms and your antipathies, your hatreds and your racial differences, and attempt to think in terms of the one family, the one life, and the one humanity. I ask for no sentimental or devotional response to this challenge. I would remind you that hatred and separateness have brought humanity to the present sad condition. I would add to that reminder, however, the fact that there is in the world today a large enough number of liberated men to produce a change in the attitudes of mankind and in public opinion, if they measure up by an act of the will to what they know and believe. I challenge you also to make sacrifices, to give yourself and your time and your money and your interest to carry these ideas to those around you in your own environment and to the group in which you find yourself, thus awakening your associates. I call you to a united effort to inculcate anew the ideas of brotherhood and of unity. I ask you to recognize your fellow workers in all the groups and to strengthen their hands. I ask you to seal your lips to words of hatred and of criticism, and to talk in terms of brotherhood and of group relationships. I beg of you to see to it that every day is for you a new day, in which you face new opportunity. Lose sight of your own affairs, your petty sorrows, worries and suspicions, in the urgency of the task to be done, and spread the cult of unity, of love and of harmlessness. I ask you also to sever your connection with all groups which are seeking to destroy and to attack, no matter how sincere their motive. Range yourself on the side of the workers for constructive ends, who are fighting no other groups or organizations and who have eliminated the word anti out of their vocabulary. Stand on the side of those who are silently and steadily building for the new order, an order which is founded on love, which builds under the impulse of brotherhood, and which possesses a realization of a brotherhood which is based on the knowledge that we are each and all, no matter what our race, the children of the one Father, and who have come to the realization that the old ways of working must go and the newer methods must be given a chance. If you cannot yourself teach or preach or write, give of your thought and of your money so that others can. Give of your hours and minutes of leisure so as to set others free to serve the plan. Give of your money so that the work of those associated with the new group of world servers may go forward with rapidity. Much time you waste on non-essentials. Many of you give little or nothing of time. The same is the case with money. Give as never before, and so make the physical aspects of the work possible. Some give of their very need, and the power they thereby release is great. Those on the inner side are grateful for the giving by those who can give only at great personal cost. Others give of what they can spare and only when it needs no sacrifice to give. Let that condition also end, and give to the limit, with justice and understanding, so that the age of love and light may be more rapidly ushered in. I care not where or to whom you give, only that you give, little if you have but little of time or money, much if you have much. Work and give, love and think, and aid those groups who are building and not destroying, loving and not attacking, lifting and not tearing down. Be not taken in by the specious argument that destruction is needed. It has been needed, no doubt, but the cycle of destruction is practically over, could you but realize it, and the builders must now get busy. I challenge you above all to a deeper life, and I implore you for the sake of your fellow men to strengthen your contact with your own soul so that you will have done your share in making revelation possible, so that you will have served your part in bringing in the light, and will therefore be in a position to take advantage of that new light and new information, and so be better able to point the way and clear the path for the bewildered seeker at that time. Those who are not ready for the coming events will be blinded by the emerging light and bewildered by the revealing wonder. They will be swept by the living breath of God, and it is to you that we look to fit them for the event. Before we proceed further, I want to touch upon the apparent contradictions which occur, and which may continue to occur, in this treatise. Sometimes a ray will be spoken of as being in manifestation. At other times it may be referred to as being out of manifestation. We may speak about its influence upon a particular kingdom in nature, and then again still another ray may be regarded as of prime importance. These discrepancies are only apparent, and their cause lies hid in the right understanding of the law of cycles. Until this basic law of periodicity is comprehended, and this will not be possible until man has succeeded in developing fourth-dimensional vision, it will not be easy to avoid what may look like contradictions. At one time a certain ray may be an incarnation and thus of paramount influence, and yet, at the same time, still another ray may govern the major cycle, a cycle of which the ray under consideration may be only a temporary aspect. For instance, the seventh ray of ceremonial organization is now coming in, and the sixth ray of devotion is going out. Yet this sixth ray is a major ray cycle and its influence will not entirely disappear for another 21,000 years. At the same time, this sixth ray might well be regarded as the sixth sub-ray of the fourth ray of harmony through conflict, which has been in manifestation for several thousand years and will remain operative for another 40,000 years. Yet at the same time, this fourth ray is out of manifestation as regards its minor and cyclic influence. Is of a most confusing nature to the beginner in occultism, and only those students who conform to the requirement of grasping the general outline and the broad basic propositions will be able to gather out of these instructions the true, intended perspective. If the reader loses himself in the mass of possible analyses and intricacies of the imparted detail, he will not emerge into the realm of that clear vision which is intended. When he eliminates the detail and deals with the general confirmation of the solar plan, he will then be enabled to cooperate with the needed intelligence. Read therefore constructively and not critically, knowing that it is not easy to see the plan as it exists in the minds of the builders, who work in the closest cooperation, conforming to the initial plan, and yet carrying forward their individual efforts with concentration and sustained enterprise. 3. Three major propositions. We have been studying the significance of the work of the seven creative builders, as they express the life aspect and qualify the phenomenal appearance through which the one life manifests. It is the quality in time and space that determines the phenomenal appearance, and this is the third major proposition of which the two previous are. A. Every ray life is an expression of a solar life, and every planet is therefore linked with every other planet, animated by energy from one or other of the seven solar systems, and actuated by a triple stream of force. B. Every one of the rays is the recipient and custodian of various energies, coming from varying sources. To these two we add C. It is the quality of a ray life, in time and space, which determines the phenomenal appearance. In these three propositions you have summed up the basic teaching of this section. Here I can point out with success, I believe, the practical efficacy of a true understanding of these rather advanced occult teachings. If, for instance, you study the first proposition, you will note how array life is an expression of a solar life. Now take this broad idea and make it personally specific by referring the same proposition to an individual man, grasping the fact that every personality is intended to be an expression of a solar angel, and is consequently linked to every other solar angel in the kingdom of souls. Each is animated by the energies coming from all the 7 groups of solar angels, and is likewise in touch with the life of the planet, of the solar system, and with extra-systemic force also. Is this not of vital, practical import? Does it not warrant close study and consideration of the attitude of the personality towards life, and of the measure of success of the solar angel at any given point in time and space, which is all that the personality is, in the last analysis, as it builds and qualifies its phenomenal appearance? Here we can see the scientific value of the study of ideals, of concentration upon the virtues and divine qualities, and upon an intellectual analysis of the divine attributes of any of the great sons of God. Again, the second proposition states that the 7 rays, being each the recipient and custodian of energies coming from the universe, bring in the basic concept of interrelation, of intercommunication, of interdependence, of cooperative responsibility, and of service. These relationships, as we well know, underlie the principle of brotherhood, which the race is just beginning to grasp and to discuss. Thus one of the major propositions which govern the building forces of the universe is of real practical application to the mental life and attitude of man today. The first proposition relates to the ego, or solar angel, and its realization. The second proposition relates to the mental grasp of the inspired man, inspired from on high by his solar angel. The third proposition, which states that quality determines the appearance, is intended to control or direct the feeling or desire life of the personality, for according to the quality of his desires will be the gradually emerging appearance. Man is innately and truly divine, but the quality of the solar angel only makes its presence felt. Slowly and during the evolutionary cycle, it demonstrates only dimly as yet, and only emerges occasionally, though the sum total of characteristics in any one life is colored by divine quality according to the egoic capacity to control or express, it is distorted by substance in the early stages almost past all recognition. These 3 propositions warrant careful thought and even meditation, for as they express the laws under which the 7 creative builders work, so do they express the laws under which the aspirant can now begin to work. 4. Quality in the world of appearances. We now take up the definition of the word quality, which embodies the second ray aspect. This second aspect is the determining ray or the second manifesting aspect of divinity. It is the Christ or Vishnu aspect, it is the sentient consciousness aspect of deity in form. I stated also that we would consider its expression in the world of phenomena, meaning by this the world of external appearance and of tangible forms. The quality that emerges through the process of manifesting, and under the impulse of the divine life, is love, which functions through the medium of the law of attraction, with the aim of producing an ultimate synthesis in consciousness. Let us not forget that the objective of our present evolutionary process is the unfoldment of conscious awareness. The entire process is directed towards that consummation. Quality, in the last analysis, is neither more nor less than the nature of that awareness, and the response in terms of quality to sentient contact. Through the gradually unfolding mechanism of contact, itself the result of active quality, determining the life of the unit cells which compose the form, the range of contacts extends indefinitely, and the response of the living entity to contact becomes more vital, more understanding in its capacity, and more synthetically comprehended. This response develops in 2 directions. 1. It leads to a comprehension of the response apparatus and to a wise use of the mechanism of contact. 2. It leads also to an understanding of the response of the individual consciousness to the consciousness contacted. This is brought about through the medium of the response mechanism. This other response apparatus may be either more developed or less developed than the one that does the contacting. It is this interplay between the consciousnesses using the mechanisms that confers an understanding of quality. This interplay confers an understanding of the activity underlying the appearance and motivating it. Exoteric science enables the activity aspect of the phenomenal forms to be apprehended and studied, and all the many manifestations of the many schools of human thought, which enlarge through their researches the range of human knowledge, have the same objective. At the same time, they increase our capacity to grasp the intense activity of every form in every kingdom in nature, and of every atom and cell within those forms. Science has led us on from pinnacle to pinnacle of achievement, till today we are lost in a world of energies. We have been taught to picture to ourselves a world of vibrating points of force which constitute in the aggregate all forms of life, and which present to our astonished and bewildered intellects a planetary life which is the sum total of all known forms. Each form is a universe in itself, and all forms are alive, vibrating with divine activity. We use the word energy to express this activity, and beyond that we are as yet unable to pass. Energy is life, and energy is also death. Activity is to be sensed and known in the organic and in the inorganic, a vast series of atomic lives built up into structure after structure and found to be in ceaseless motion. A vast series of living structures, built up into still greater and more inclusive forms, are all found, again, to be in equally ceaseless motion. These greater structures, in their turn, are found to be vibrant organisms, and so there unfolds before man's conscious vision nothing but life and activity, naught but motion and energy, and always a coherence, an ordered purpose, a growing synthesis, a plan, and a will. To this, science sets its seal, for scientific knowledge is the indication of man's response, through the collective response apparatus of humanity as a whole, to the mechanism of awareness of the great life in which we live and move and have our being, the planetary logos of our Earth. The esoteric sciences carry us within the form or forms, and enable us to penetrate to the quality aspect. Students would do well to remember that occultism may be the study of forces, and that the occultist moves in the worlds of force, but these are also the worlds of quality and of those qualifying energies which are seeking to manifest through the world of appearances. As they achieve this, they will dominate the activity of the form units which constitute the phenomenal world. There are energies which lie behind the phenomena produced by the activity of the atomic structures. These are latent and unseen and often unfelt, they are subjective. The esoteric sciences have one purpose in view, and that is to produce the gradual emergence of these energies, so that the skilled occultist can eventually work in a dual yet unified world of force, and be the creative will which guides, blends and utilizes the world of appearances and the realm of qualities. These two types of active creative energies must be controlled by the creating will or life aspect so that they function as one. Therefore the aspirant is taught to turn within, to study motives, to acquaint himself with the qualities which are seeking expression in the outer world through the medium of his outer mechanism. As he learns to do this, the nature of that outer world of mechanisms alters, and he increasingly becomes aware of the qualities struggling for expression behind the outer forms. Thus the range of his conscious contacts extends, and he passes, through scientific research, from an exoteric understanding of the world of phenomenal appearances to an esoteric comprehension of the world of qualities. Never forget, therefore, that this dual apprehension must be emphasized, and that as a man learns to know himself, he automatically learns to know the quality underlying all appearances. Look therefore for the quality everywhere. This is what we mean when we speak of seeing divinity on every hand, of recognizing the note sounded by all beings, and of registering the hidden motif of all appearing. The unawakened man or woman sees the form, notes its forms of activity, and judges by appearances. The awakening aspirant begins to sense some of the beauties that lie unrevealed behind all forms. The awakened disciple lays the focus of his attention upon the emerging world of qualities, and becomes steadily aware of color, of new ranges of sound, of an inner evolving and newer response apparatus which is beginning to enable him to contact the unseen, the intangible, and the unrevealed. He becomes aware of those subjective impulses which condition the quality of the life, and which are slowly and gradually revealing themselves. It is this unrevealed inner beauty which lies back of the emphasis laid by the churches upon the cultivation of the virtues, and by the occultists upon the use of a seed thought in meditation. These seed thoughts and virtues serve a valuable and constructive purpose. The biblical truism that, as a man thinketh in his heart, so is he, is based on the same basic realization, and the distinction between the spiritual man and the man of worldly and material purpose consists in the fact that one is attempting to work with the quality aspect of the life, and the other is focusing his attention upon the appearance aspect. He may and does employ certain qualities as he so works, but they are those qualities which have been developed during the evolutionary process of the divine life as it has cycled through the subhuman and human kingdoms. Each of the kingdoms in nature has developed, or is developing, one outstanding quality, with the other divine attributes as subsidiary. The mineral kingdom has the quality of activity primarily emphasized, and its two extremes are the tamasic quality, or the static inert nature of the mineral world, and the quality of radioactivity, of radiation which is its beautiful and divinely perfected expression. The goal for all mineral atomic forms is this radioactive condition, the power to pass through all limiting and environing substances. This is initiation, or the entering into a state of liberation, for all mineral appearances, and the organizing of all forms in this kingdom under the influence of the seventh ray. The vegetable kingdom has the quality of attractiveness, expressed in color, and its liberation, or its highest form of activity, is demonstrated by the perfume of its highest forms of life. This perfume is connected with its sex life, which has group purpose and which calls to its aid the initiating wind and the insect world. This is not just a pictorial way of portraying truth. The very nature of perfume, its purpose and intent, is to affect those agencies which will produce the spreading and the continuity of the life of the vegetable kingdom. The aspirants in the vegetable kingdom, and the most evolved of its forms, have beauty and perfume, and are susceptible to the hidden influences of those to whom is confided the initiating of the life forms and their bringing to a desired perfection. Hence the influence of the sixth ray of devotion upon this kingdom, and the application of the ray of devotion which, symbolically expressed, fixes the eye upon the sun, turns the life ever to the rays of warmth, and causes the blending of the colors and the glory of the perfumed radiance. The animal kingdom has the quality of growing instinctual purpose which, in its highest form, works out as the domesticity of the more evolved animals, and their devotion to man. Behind the appearance of the animals is to be found a steady orientation towards understanding, and a consequent gravitation towards the forms of life which evidence that which they desire. Hence the influence of the fifth ray of concrete knowledge, which pours through the human family upon the third kingdom in nature. Man is the initiating factor here, and to man is committed the task of leading the animal kingdom towards liberation, a liberation into the fourth kingdom, for that is the sphere of its next activity. The vegetable kingdom is liberated into another evolutionary process altogether, and its lives pass into the so-called diva, or angel, evolution. Hence the wind and the insect world are its agents, just as man and the agency of water are the initiators of the animal world. The secret of release for the animal nature is hidden in the watery nature. This is the blood aspect, and in the shedding of the blood, esoterically understood, lies the clue to the liberation of the animal kingdom. Hence certain initiatory processes are working out on a large scale in the shedding of blood through the slaughter of the animal form of the human being in the Great War, for instance. In the war the blood of thousands was poured out upon the soil, and from the standpoint of living purpose, certain esoteric results have been achieved. This fact is a difficult one for man to understand, for his awareness is as yet primarily that of the form and not of the quality of the life. It is difficult for men to comprehend the divine purpose working out behind the evils of animal slaughter and the shedding of blood down the ages, pre-human and human. But through the pouring out of that water which is of the color red, there is eventuating a liberation which will initiate the life of that kingdom into new states of consciousness and of awareness. The whole problem of slaughter, whether in the animal or the human kingdom, originated in events which occurred during the original war in heaven, when Michael and his angels were cast down and our planetary system came into being. Until a man's consciousness is such that he can, through an inner mechanism as yet unevolved in the majority, respond to the planetary consciousness and enter into the secrets of the Ancient of Days, the problem of pain, of bloodshed, of war and of suffering must remain an inscrutable mystery. It will be solved, and this is the keynote of most importance, only when man has himself changed the initiating process for the animals from that of bloodshed to that of domesticity and of mutual love. When the mentality of the race is more developed, then man can, by arbitration and the right use of speech, settle all differences, and thus change the mode of animal initiation, whether this refers to the animal kingdom or to his own animal body. In the fourth kingdom, the emerging quality is that aspect of synthetic love or understanding which is the intuition. This intuition is a quality of mental matter and of the chitta, or mind stuff. Man is also intended to be radioactive, the incense or the perfume of his life must ascend, and thus attract the attention of the initiating factors which wait to lead him to liberation. These factors are the fire and the members of the fifth kingdom in nature. The growing purpose of his animal form must give place to the dynamic will of the spiritual entity, released from form limitations by the fire of life and of initiation. Thus he harmonizes in himself all ways of approach and of release, and all achievements, and synthesizes in his life the aspirations of the other three kingdoms. Radioactivity, the perfume of the aspirant, the devotion to other human beings, the sublimation of domesticity, and the shedding of blood, or the sacrifice of the life, the expression upon earth, the mineral kingdom, of the devotion and sex life of the vegetable kingdom, plus the sacrifice through blood of the animal kingdom, bring man to the portal of initiation. There the fire awaits him with its purifying uses, and thus earth, air, fire and water, the four elements, prepare him for the great liberation and for the release of that quality of synthetic apprehension of the underlying truth which we call the intuition. This is after all the response of the mechanism to the symbolic appeal of divine quality, expressed in the whole and seen as illumination. Thus the qualities emerge and appear in their full glory as man develops himself and unfolds within himself the needed apparatus of response, training himself to recognize the subjective realities or the divine qualities as they seek to manifest. The processes of manifestation produce results upon and in the gradually awakening consciousness of man. 5. Analysis of the rays and their expression, from an earlier manuscript. There is a vast fund of interesting knowledge as to the action and results of the ray activity in the lower kingdoms of nature, but on this point no details can be given, and the following summary of what we have been told is necessarily imperfect and admits of endless amplification. First ray of will or power. Special virtues. Strength, courage, steadfastness, truthfulness arising from absolute fearlessness, power of ruling, capacity to grasp great questions in a large-minded way, and of handling men and measures. Vices of ray. Pride, ambition, willfulness, hardness, arrogance, desire to control others, obstinacy, anger. Virtues to be acquired. Tenderness, humility, sympathy, tolerance, patience. This has been spoken of as the ray of power, and is correctly so called, but if it were power alone, without wisdom and love, a destructive and disintegrating force would result. When however the three characteristics are united, it becomes a creative and governing ray. Those on this ray have strong will power, for either good or evil, for the former when the will is directed by wisdom and made selfless by love. The first ray man will always come to the front in his own line. He may be the burglar or the judge who condemns him, but in either case he will be at the head of his profession. He is the born leader in any and every public career, one to trust and lean on, one to defend the weak and put down oppression, fearless of consequences and utterly indifferent to comment. On the other hand, an unmodified first ray can produce a man of unrelenting cruelty and hardness of nature. The first ray man often has strong feeling and affection, but he does not readily express it. He will love strong contrasts and masses of color, but will rarely be an artist. He will delight in great orchestral effects and crashing choruses, and if modified by the fourth, sixth or seventh rays, may be a great composer, but not otherwise, and there is a type of this ray which is tone deaf, and another which is color blind to the more delicate colors. Such a man will distinguish red and yellow, but will hopelessly confuse blue, green and violet. The literary work of a first-ray man will be strong and trenchant, but he will care little for style or finish in his writings. Perhaps examples of this type would be Luther, Carlyle, and Walt Whitman. It is said that in attempting the cure of disease, the best method for the first-ray man would be to draw health and strength from the great fount of universal life by his will power, and then pour it through the patient. This, of course, presupposes knowledge on his part of occult methods. The characteristic method of approaching the great quest on this ray would be by sheer force of will. Such a man would, as it were, take the kingdom of heaven by violence. We have seen that the born leader belongs to this ray, wholly or in part. It makes the able commander-in-chief, such as Napoleon or Kitchener. Napoleon was first and fourth rays, and Kitchener was first and seventh, the seventh ray giving him his remarkable power of organization. The second ray of love-wisdom. Special virtues: calm, strength, patience and endurance, love of truth, faithfulness, intuition, clear intelligence, and serene temper. Vices of ray: overabsorption in study, coldness, indifference to others, contempt of mental limitations in others. Virtues to be acquired: love, compassion, unselfishness, energy. This is called the ray of wisdom from its characteristic desire for pure knowledge and for absolute truth, cold and selfish, if without love, and inactive without power. When both power and love are present, then you have the ray of the Buddhas and of all great teachers of humanity, those who, having attained wisdom for the sake of others, spend themselves in giving it forth. The student on this ray is ever unsatisfied with his highest attainments. No matter how great his knowledge, his mind is still fixed on the unknown, the beyond, and on the heights as yet unscaled. The second ray man will have tact and foresight. He will make an excellent ambassador, and a first-rate teacher or head of a college. As a man of affairs, he will have clear intelligence and wisdom in dealing with matters which come before him, and he will have the capacity of impressing true views of things on others and of making them see things as he does. He will make a good businessman, if modified by the fourth, fifth and seventh rays. The soldier on this ray would plan wisely and foresee possibilities. He would have an intuition as to the best course to pursue, and he would never lead his men into danger through rashness. He might be deficient in rapidity of action and energy. The artist on this ray would always seek to teach through his art, and his pictures would have a meaning. His literary work would always be instructive. The method of healing, for the second ray man, would be to learn thoroughly the temperament of the patient as well as to be thoroughly conversant with the nature of the disease, so as to use his will power on the case to the best advantage. The characteristic method of approaching the path would be by close and earnest study of the teachings till they become so much a part of the man's consciousness as no longer to be merely intellectual knowledge, but a spiritual rule of living, thus bringing in intuition and true wisdom. A bad type of the second ray would be bent on acquiring knowledge for himself alone, absolutely indifferent to the human needs of others. The foresight of such a man would degenerate into suspicion, his calmness into coldness and hardness of nature. The third ray of higher mind. Special virtues: wide views on all abstract questions, sincerity of purpose, clear intellect, capacity for concentration on philosophic studies, patience, caution, absence of the tendency to worry himself or others over trifles. Vices of ray: intellectual pride, coldness, isolation, inaccuracy in details, absent-mindedness, obstinacy, selfishness, overmuch criticism of others. Virtues to be acquired: sympathy, tolerance, devotion, accuracy, energy and common sense. This is the ray of the abstract thinker, of the philosopher and the metaphysician, of the man who delights in the higher mathematics but who, unless modified by some practical ray, would hardly be troubled to keep his accounts accurately. His imaginative faculty will be highly developed, i.e., he can by the power of his imagination grasp the essence of a truth. His idealism will often be strong. He is a dreamer and a theorist, and from his wide views and great caution he sees every side of a question equally clearly. This sometimes paralyses his action. He will make a good businessman. As a soldier he will work out a problem in tactics at his desk, but is seldom great in the field. As an artist his technique is not fine, but his subjects will be full of thought and interest. He will love music, but unless influenced by the fourth ray he will not produce it. In all walks of life he is full of ideas, but is too impractical to carry them out. One type of this ray is unconventional to a degree, slovenly, unpunctual and idle, and regardless of appearances. If influenced by the fifth ray as the secondary ray this character is entirely changed. The third and the fifth rays make the perfectly balanced historian who grasps his subject in a large way and verifies every detail with patient accuracy. Again the third and the fifth rays together make the truly great mathematician who soars into heights of abstract thought and calculation, and who can also bring his results down to practical scientific use. The literary style of the third ray man is too often vague and involved, but if influenced by the first, fourth, fifth or seventh rays, this is changed, and under the fifth he will be a master of the pen. The curing of disease by the third ray man would be by the use of drugs made of herbs or minerals belonging to the same ray as the patient whom he desires to relieve. The method of approaching the great quest, for this ray type, is by deep thinking on philosophic or metaphysical lines till he is led to the realization of the great beyond and of the paramount importance of treading the path that leads thither. The fourth ray of harmony through conflict. Special virtues: strong affections, sympathy, physical courage, generosity, devotion, quickness of intellect and perception. Vices of ray: self-centeredness, worrying, inaccuracy, lack of moral courage, strong passions, indolence, extravagance. Virtues to be acquired: serenity, confidence, self-control, purity, unselfishness, accuracy, mental and moral balance. This has been called the ray of struggle, for on this ray the qualities of rajas, activity, and tamas, inertia, are so strangely equal in proportion that the nature of the fourth ray man is torn with their combat, and the outcome, when satisfactory, is spoken of as the birth of Horus, of the Christ, born from the throes of constant pain and suffering. Tamas induces love of ease and pleasure, a hatred of causing pain amounting to moral cowardice, indolence, procrastination, a desire to let things be, to rest, and to take no thought of the morrow. Rajas is fiery, impatient, ever urging to action. These contrasting forces in the nature make life one perpetual warfare and unrest for the fourth ray man. The friction and the experience gained thereby may produce very rapid evolution, but the man may as easily become a ne'er-do-well as a hero. It is the ray of the dashing cavalry leader, reckless of risks to himself or his followers. It is the ray of the man who will lead a forlorn hope, for in moments of excitement the fourth ray man is entirely dominated by rajas, of the wild speculator and gambler, full of enthusiasm and plans, easily overwhelmed by sorrow or failure, but as quickly recovering from all reverses and misfortunes. It is pre-eminently the ray of color, of the artist whose color is always great, though his drawing will often be defective. Watts was fourth and second rays. The fourth ray man always loves color, and can generally produce it. If untrained as an artist, a color sense is sure to appear in other ways, in choice of dress or decorations. In music, fourth ray compositions are always full of melody, and the fourth ray man loves a tune. As a writer or poet, his work will often be brilliant and full of picturesque word painting, but inaccurate, full of exaggerations, and often pessimistic. He will generally talk well and have a sense of humor, but he varies between brilliant conversations and gloomy silences, according to his mood. He is a delightful and difficult person to live with. In healing, the best fourth ray method is massage and magnetism, used with knowledge. The method of approaching the path will be by self-control, thus gaining equilibrium amongst the warring forces of the nature. The lower and extremely dangerous way is by Hatha Yoga. The fifth ray of lower mind. Special virtues: strictly accurate statements, justice, without mercy, perseverance, common sense, uprightness, independence, keen intellect. Vices of ray: harsh criticism, narrowness, arrogance, unforgiving temper, lack of sympathy and reverence, prejudice. Virtues to be acquired: reverence, devotion, sympathy, love, wide-mindedness. This is the ray of science and of research. The man on this ray will possess keen intellect, great accuracy in detail, and will make unwearied efforts to trace the smallest fact to its source, and to verify every theory. He will generally be extremely truthful, full of lucid explanation of facts, though sometimes pedantic and wearisome from his insistence on trivial and unnecessary verbal minutiae. He will be orderly, punctual, businesslike, disliking to receive favors or flattery. It is the ray of the great chemist, the practical electrician, the first-rate engineer, the great operating surgeon. As a statesman, the fifth-ray man would be narrow in his views, but he would be an excellent head of some special technical department, though a disagreeable person under whom to work. As a soldier, he would turn most readily to artillery and engineering. The artist on this ray is very rare, unless the fourth or seventh be the influencing secondary rays. Even then, his coloring will be dull, his sculptures lifeless, and his music, if he composes, will be uninteresting, though technically correct in form. His style in writing or speaking will be clearness itself, but it will lack fire and point, and he will often be long-winded, from his desire to say all that can possibly be said on his subject. In healing, he is the perfect surgeon, and his best cures will be through surgery and electricity. For the fifth ray, the method of approaching the path is by scientific research, pushed to ultimate conclusions, and by the acceptance of the inferences which follow these. The sixth ray of devotion. Special virtues. Devotion, single-mindedness, love, tenderness, intuition, loyalty, reverence. Vices of ray. Selfish and jealous love, overleaning on others, partiality, self-deception, sectarianism, superstition, prejudice, over-rapid conclusions, fiery anger. Virtues to be acquired. Strength, self-sacrifice, purity, truth, tolerance, serenity, balance and common sense. This is called the ray of devotion. The man who is on this ray is full of religious instincts and impulses, and of intense personal feeling. Nothing is taken equably. Everything, in his eyes, is either perfect or intolerable. His friends are angels, his enemies are very much the reverse. His view, in both cases, is formed not on the intrinsic merits of either class, but on the way the persons appeal to him, or on the sympathy or lack of sympathy which they show to his favorite idols, whether these be concrete or abstract, for he is full of devotion. It may be to a person, or it may be to a cause. He must always have a personal God, an incarnation of deity to adore. The best type of this ray makes the saint, the worst type, the bigot or fanatic, the typical martyr or the typical inquisitor. All religious wars or crusades have originated from sixth-ray fanaticism. The man on this ray is often of gentle nature, but he can always flame into fury and fiery wrath. He will lay down his life for the objects of his devotion or reverence, but he will not lift a finger to help those outside of his immediate sympathies. As a soldier, he hates fighting but often when roused in battle fights like one possessed. He is never a great statesman nor a good businessman, but he may be a great preacher or orator. The sixth-ray man will be the poet of the emotions, such as Tennyson, and the writer of religious books, either in poetry or prose. He is devoted to beauty and color and all things lovely, but his productive skill is not great unless under the influence of one of the practically artistic rays, the fourth or seventh. His music will always be of a melodious order, and he will often be the composer of oratories and of sacred music. The method of healing for this ray would be by faith and prayer. The way of approaching the path would be by prayer and meditation, aiming at union with God. The seventh ray of ceremonial order or magic. Strength, perseverance, courage, courtesy, extreme care in details, self-reliance. Vices of ray. Formalism, bigotry, pride, narrowness, superficial judgments, self-opinion overindulged. Virtues to be acquired. Realization of unity, wide-mindedness, tolerance, humility, gentleness and love. This is the ceremonial ray, the ray which makes a man delight in all things done decently and in order, and according to rule and precedent. It is the ray of the high priest and the court chamberlain, of the soldier who is a born genius in organization, of the ideal commissary general who will dress and feed the troops in the best possible way. It is the ray of the perfect nurse for the sick, careful in the smallest detail, though sometimes too much inclined to disregard the patient's idiosyncrasies and to try and grind them in the iron mill of routine. It is the ray of form, of the perfect sculptor, who sees and produces ideal beauty, of the designer of beautiful forms and patterns of any sort. But such a man would not be successful as a painter unless his influencing ray were the fourth. The combination of 4 with 7 would make the very highest type of artist, form and color being both in excelsis. The literary work of the seventh ray man would be remarkable for its ultra-polished style, and such a writer would think far more of the manner than of the matter in his work, but would always be fluent both in writing and speech. The seventh ray man will often be sectarian. He will delight in fixed ceremonials and observances, in great processions and shows, in reviews of troops and warships, in genealogical trees, and in rules of precedence. The bad type of seventh ray man is superstitious, and such a man will take deep interest in omens, in dreams, in all occult practices, and in spiritualistic phenomena. The good type of the ray is absolutely determined to do the right thing and say the right word at the right moment, hence great social success. In healing, the seventh ray man would rely on extreme exactness in carrying out orthodox treatment of disease. On him the practices of yoga would have no physical bad results. He will approach the path through observance of rules of practice and of ritual, and can easily evoke and control the elemental forces. From many of the above remarks it may have been inferred that the characteristics of any given ray find closer correspondence with one of the other rays than with the rest. This is a fact. The only one which stands alone and has no close relationship with any of the others is the fourth. This brings to mind the unique position which the number 4 occupies in the evolutionary process. We have the fourth root race, the fourth planetary chain, the fourth planet in the chain, the fourth planetary manvantara, etc. Between the third and the fifth rays there is a close relationship. In the search after knowledge, for example, the most laborious and minute study of detail is the path that will be followed, whether in philosophy, the higher mathematics or in the pursuit of practical science. The correspondence between the second and the sixth rays shows itself in the intuitive grasp of synthesized knowledge, and in the common bond of faithfulness and loyalty. Masterfulness, steadfastness, and perseverance are the corresponding characteristics of the first and the seventh rays.